All right, so we're going here. I'm here with I wish I was here with Jenny Benjamin, but I'm via Zoom. So this is not my like when I started the podcast, I really did it so that I could actually have sit down
Mm.
face to face, eye to eye, because if I go to look at you, I got to look up at my camera and then I
Right.
can't see you. So it's terrible. And then um we have a tendency to speak over each other and everything else when it's like this too, because you can't take the like social cues as far as what's going on. So, but this is, the COVID situation. This is how I'm doing it. You know, uh, like I said, not my preferred way. I really did the podcast for the conversations, and these
Yeah.
are good. I've had a couple of ones with just friends where we're just hanging out and drinking and stuff like that. Is not the same. It's not the jokes aren't as good. Nothing's as good. But so Jenny, you're an author and a poet, and I'm an idiot. So I'm not right. I'm not going to be able to like. I probably if I read a poem, sometimes wouldn't know it was a poem. I believe. I think Obama had a poet do something at his
Mm.
inauguration, and she
Yes.
was reading a poem, and I was like, "Oh, that's a poem. All right." Like, I thought it had to be like the silly ones when we were kids that you learned and everything else, but it's so. What makes something a poem?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, if you like music, that's lyrics are very poetic and oftentimes can be an equivalent of a poem. You can think of it that way, but
Okay.
you can have a poem be free verse, so it doesn't have to rhyme, it doesn't have to have a specific pattern, or you could have formal verse, which is you follow a set pattern and rhyme scheme. So every
Okay.
other line or whatever the rhyme scheme is, it rhymes. So those are some basic things that make it a poem. But really, a poem is just anything that captures an emotion in space and time that someone in one place is trying to communicate. This is what I feel and this is what I've experienced. So here it's to you, the reader. What
Mhm.
can you do with it, and how do you feel when you read that? So I think it can be many different things. Sometimes just small phrases can be poetic.
Right. So it's definitely art because, like if you see great art on canvas, it definitely gives you a feeling of, maybe, and everyone might get a different feeling from it. But like if you look at like Picasso's Blue Period and stuff like that, there's some things when you look at it, you just see sad. It's like, wow, that's
Yeah,
sad. That guy looks lonely. Even though
exactly.
it's not quite, it's a little distorted and stuff like that, it still is lonely. But so I think that there's a certain amount of bravery to that. Like
Hmm.
I mean, so if you're writing something, I gotta imagine those are your feelings.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's because sometimes, well, when I've done book clubs, which for either my fiction or my poetry, um, I feel like sometimes when I ask, "Hey, are you okay?" Because like some of the stuff you're writing about, is that there's
Right, right, right.
either just what kind of trauma have you been through, or what psychologically is wrong with you. And it's the thing is, when you use your imagination, you can go anywhere. So sometimes it's me, but it's not me. So it's maybe a sliver of something that happened to me that I give a narrative to. So I give a story to. So it could be in the poem, it could be in fiction, and it becomes its own entity then. So um, I like that you say it's brave, but there's also a little bit of cowardice too, because I can hide behind a character, and
Oh, right,
I don't
yeah.
know if that's the right word, but sometimes, oh, well, I don't know. I had this really icky thing happen to me, but I don't want to just come out and say it or write a memoir about this thing in my life. So I'm going to work through and make this character and then make this happen and this happen and that happen.
Right, but
So
if I would think someone would almost see through that, especially if they had been through something similar, because you can't walk through somebody else's shoes. So if your feeling hit the mark or was genuine, they would know that the character or not, you had
right.
gone through this thing. Uh, which, like I said, there's especially like for a guy. I'm sure there's male poets, but it would be just foreign to me to like want to like, I don't know, express feeling. Like when you said it's like music, then I get that because the lyrics to music have always been super important to me.
Okay.
It really is. Like there are songs that I listen to, classic rock stuff, that I'm like, how did I not hear that part like 20 years ago when I first heard that song? Like, as a dumb kid, sometimes you just pick up the chorus and you're like, yeah, I like this. This rocking song. It's cool. But
Right.
then like later on, I hear it and I'm like, wow, that's actually a whole lot deeper, or it's about something completely different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's beside the point of having. So with my construction company, I would have guys on the jobs. We'd have a radio blaring while we were working, and every once in a while, someone would walk past me singing the wrong lyrics, and I just thought that was the greatest thing ever. My favorite one was my one of my guys, Bob. He was there's a Stevie Nicks song that is the White Winged Dove, and it's like just like the White Winged Dove says ooh ooh ooh, and he's at the top of his lungs singing just like the one we love says ooh ooh ooh, and I'm like, what did you just say, man? And he's just wrong, but he was
I kind of like his line better.
yeah, right. So with that situation, like, how's the process go? How do you're obviously an empath of some sort, because you can look at something and try and feel for them too,
Right.
which, I would venture to guess there's not any like real hard wing or right wing, taxationist theft people who are like, empaths also in writing poetry, because, all they care about is whether my corporation gets taxed or this nonsense like that. So like those don't probably make great poems. But I mean, that's what I'm reading into it, at least. I don't, I don't know you do have a book for Barack Obama, so I would guess that you're not right leaning.
Oh yeah, I'm left of left.
Okay, so yeah, I'm myself. I'm like some weird enigma of, I don't know, just a weird combination of things. There's things that, like, I grew up hunting and stuff like that, and the way that I grew up hunting, like, I was really instilled with this like respect for the animals and respect for the fact that you're only going to take what you're supposed to take for the day and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And using every part of the animal. And then there's this whole other like relationship that I'd have with the dog, because I always hunted over a dog. I mean, so much so that like I had a job that we were on, and I had to bring my hunting boots to the job the one day because they come up to my knee. It was really wet there that day, and I didn't want to get wet. So I brought my hunting boots. The dog saw me get the hunting boots, thought for sure we were going. I couldn't take him to the job, so I felt bad, but I had to go. And that dog did not look at me for like 3 days. He was like,
"Oh, you got the cold shoulder." The stink eye, even.
Totally upset with me that he can't believe you went hunting. Because the thing that we do between each other, it's me and him and whoever I take with me hunting, and then afterwards, when I dress the birds and everything else, he gets parts of it and everything. Like, it's a whole process. Yes, and it's a whole thing for him. Like, it's his whole purpose in life. And I cheated him out of it.
You did? No.
Right. So it's funny to say, like, he had feelings about it. Obviously, he had.
Absolutely.
If he could write a poem, it would have been a nice one. It would have been something really rude.
The jilted poem.
Right. So I did not get a chance. Like, I've seen you on Facebook and stuff like that, and I Googled you and then looked at the books. The poetry stuff sounds super interesting, because it's like, and I didn't get a chance to read any of it. Sorry, but
that's okay.
I will. Sometimes I think for me, like, I like creative writing and stuff, but I think I don't know, be like out of my depth with poetry. So I figured maybe I'd talk to you first, see how that went, and then go ahead and like try and pick up one of your books. They're available, on Amazon and stuff like that, so I can grab one. But so most of your poetry, what's it about? Like, how's how
Well, I have so 2 chapbooks out, and chapbooks are shorter than, so this is good if you're trying to kind of get into poetry. I think chapbooks are nice because they're shorter than a regular volume of poetry. So maybe 16 to 20 some pages rather than like a 40 to 50 page poetry book.
Okay.
Because that can be overwhelming, I think, especially if you haven't read a lot of poetry.
Sure.
So the two chapbooks are one's called Midway, and that is written in all different forms. So have you heard of a sonnet?
Yeah, right. And then
Okay, so you know of some forms, but there's all kinds of different forms in there called, like I wrote a triolet or a villanelle. So basically every poem in that chapbook is some kind of poetic form.
okay.
And I think that has a lot of different, some older poems, and very brand new poems right before it got published. And that thematically deals a lot with grief and dealing with the death of my father, and caretaking too for my father. He had a pretty debilitating stroke when I was just 29 or 30. And so my sister and I, who ended up in Milwaukee, we moved our parents up here to help with the caretaking. And this is right at the time I'm having kids, so it was, it seems like it's been this pretty intense life. Like I think of like pre that time and then post that time, and I'm like, wow, I was in this cakewalk. I didn't even realize it. And then life hit and it got a lot harder, but also a lot of beauty there too. And I don't think, so Midway is definitely dealing with some grief and processing that, I think. And my mother who's passed away this year, at the time I was writing that, was starting to fail with congestive heart failure. And again, helping with her care. She lived with my sister and sister's husband and family, and they were the primary caretakers, but I'm in Milwaukee, I did a lot too. So dealing with grief, and I liked writing in forms with dealing with grief because it kind of gave me a package. Like if anybody who's had a loss, and as we're getting a little older here, but we've dealt with these losses, and
absolutely.
And what I find is that it's a way for me to contain the grief and deal with it, because we can't just boo-hoo all day and just wallow. I mean, some days we might, or whatever it is that the challenges or the grief is, but for the most part, there are other things that have to be done. So it's a way to kind of face it on and grapple with it, and then try to make something beautiful out of that. So that's Midway with the forms. And then More Than a Box of Crayons is, I started writing I called them my color poems. I was doing this little color project, and I would ask people. I was in the writing group I had at the time. I did questionnaires for them, like, what color would you name this, or pick a person in your life, or describe this color and your memory from this specific color. And I wouldn't pick like fuchsia or, I'd pick just blue, yellow, your primary colors, purple, those things. And so then it was so much fun to collect that information from people and to get their feelings on different colors. So the core of More Than a Box of Crayons, and you can kind of see it with the title, is my color poems. But intermixed in there is some just poems I thought that thematically worked with some of the things happening in the color poems. So tried to answer back, kind of like when you're comparing and talking about music, those artists are thinking about the compilation of the whole album, and what songs, what the order really matters, and then trying to get the themes together and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I was having that conversation with my son not that long ago about how albums, I don't think they work like that anymore, because everything's just
oh really
Spotify,
everything
else now. So like, somebody posted on social media Led Zeppelin 2, and the first time that I bought my own albums, the Led Zeppelin 2 and Black Sabbath Paranoid were the two albums that I bought. And I remember those two albums. I remember looking at the albums themselves for the art and everything else. And whenever somebody plays a song from any cassette I had as a kid, I actually know what the next song is. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
on the cassette.
Yeah.
Where my sons, I think they just go right to Spotify and they make a list and it
They
just,
have their playlists.
yes, it's completely. And I'm like, there used to be an art form to creating an album, and it created like a way of feeling through the album, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Right?
And
It's not.
think
I
of a
go, I don't.
poetry book like that. So when
Okay.
I was putting the poetry together, I was thinking of that, like a playlist, like, well, not a playlist, but it's a compilation. So you want it to kind of move through, and like you said, if you heard one song and you knew what was coming next, there's kind of like you want maybe the next one to answer to something earlier or
So okay,
reflect
yeah.
back.
So it's like is it like almost telling a bigger story, or is it like, like a fireworks show where they start out small and then ends up big? You know what I mean? I don't know. Is there, like, if you go to a concert, a lot of times a playlist is more about that grand finale kind of a thing where they
Right.
play their biggest hit, old hit, or something like that at the end. They play some
Yeah.
new stuff in the middle, or however they arrange it. But so every artist has got to be different, right? With as
Yeah.
far
And every book, like, hang on. I just got a book from the library. I love this poet, Ross Gay. And this, I can't wait to read this book. Now, see this, wait, I can't get it it's
yeah,
called
yeah,
Beholding. He's one
okay.
of my favorite poets. And so this is supposed to be, and I don't know anything about, gosh, I can't even think of who the sport person is. So it's kind of this, about a basketball player, but also about systemic racism, and
Sure.
so he's telling a story through these poems. So they're all going to keep a kind of narrative going. And I'm flipping through it now, and he actually has some photographs in here. So this, I can't wait to read this. So this would be very different from what mine was, because it's not it doesn't have a narrative arc, so it doesn't have that storyline, but this I think is going to.
So do you feel that, like, creative wise, a lot of artists, they there was there's a movie that like, I'm a big movie guy. I love watching a movie and like really trying to pay attention to what's going on in the movie, and then
Mhm.
some real weird like avant-garde stuff I like, which sounds strange for just a guy, but uh Barfly that Mickey Rourke.
Oh yeah,
So
classic.
who is he supposed to be? He's a certain poet that,
Oh, is he?
yes, he's somebody
So long.
that's real, and like the guy, like, lived the way, because I mean the guy's a mess, right? Like, he's
Yeah,
a complete alcoholic. He, anytime anything good comes in his life, he ruins it. He fights it. He does everything to destroy it because I think he, deep down, he feels that it helps his art. So
yeah,
he's miserable. He's better. He's a better artist. So do you
yeah.
feel that way? Like, I mean, you said you wrote the stuff about, taking care of your father and stuff like that.
Mhm.
When times were good, do you struggle to pull emotions
No,
out?
because I want to capture the joy too. So I'm not that kind of writer. I like to.
Sure,
I can't be miserable. There's too many good
sure,
things to
sure.
be
No,
happy about, and to too much love surrounding me. So I think that there's definitely you want. I definitely will go to the places of despair and look at them. And your comment before is dead on. I am very much an empath. So, um, and also your comment about, COVID, how it's changed. And so I'm one of those, like, oh, this is great. I can read more. I don't have to go
sure.
places. I'm
But
just
I'll tell you
really,
what, I don't mind it that much
I,
myself.
yeah,
It, like, I've made my home into a place that, like, I like to be. So
me
I'm
too. Yeah.
I'm on water, and we got, like, geese and ducks, and I've stocked the lake with fish, and
Nice.
I've done the yard the way I want it. The house has been done the way that I want it. We spend a lot of time in the gym, so we've got a full, like, big gym out there that we spend a lot of time in, and that's where, like, the movies are at. So, like, I just put some streaming network on and then watch movies, and then I'll spend sometimes 5-6 hours in there just because I'm putzing around. I can't do that when it's June because we're so busy with work. Like,
Oh, right.
my like weightlifting and stuff like that is very on again, off again. I might get in there like once or twice a week during the summertime
Hmm.
if I'm lucky, and then in the winter it's every single day that I hang out in there, just do that. And if
Yes.
I work enough in the summer months, summer, spring, and fall, I can always have this like 2, 3 months in the winter where I'm financially fine. I don't doesn't bother me to be off. I'm actually like planned for it that way. When I first
Right.
started out in construction, I tried to be like a guy that worked the year through, and I realized it was almost impossible to make money in
Oh.
January and February because every guy I got working for me is like warming up his hands.
Oh
He
yeah.
got gloves on. He can't get screws and nails out. It's just
No, it's too
good.
cold.
So
Yeah.
I would just lay them off, like go
Yeah.
collect unemployment, do whatever, and I'll just be off. I'll go skiing, snowboarding, whatever.
Hmm.
But so like I've adjusted my brain to be able to do it. It takes a little bit. I'm real antsy. Like I can't sit still.
Mm.
And I don't know if you know my situation, but I was in a construction accident 17 years ago. So I broke my
Wow.
neck 17
Okay.
years ago. I'm paralyzed from like my chest down. So this was like a real difficult thing to be a guy stuck in this situation because
Yeah.
I sleep like 6 hours a day and I'm always on the move. So being able to go out in the gym and work out for like 3 or 4 hours for me is like
Mhm.
therapy. It works
Yeah, I
every
bet it is.
time. So being an empath, that would get you to a point where you could look at somebody else's sorrow
Hmm.
and be like, this has got to feel like this, like to them, sort of a thing. Which
Right.
you know, I would say I'm an empath for sure. Like I definitely try to. There's this fine line that I got to walk because I get a little aggravated with people. I'm on a couple of groups that are on like social media that have to do with like wheelchair stuff. And what I look at those for is like travel tips and stuff like that. Because there's certain places that a guy in a chair can go that I can have
Right.
a fine time. It's fun.
Right.
There's certain towns that have done a very good job with the sidewalks and stuff like that. And I'm in a manual chair. I can do 10 miles, no problem. Like I like to get out
Wow.
and do that. But there are areas that it's just flat out dangerous. It's like
Yep.
forget it. They've just done a terrible job. So like I like to look at those cities and stuff like that. St. Louis was awful. It was terrible.
Really.
Oh, every
Oh.
curb cutout was all bad. And we went down there for the NCAA wrestling tournament, and I would not advise it for somebody. So that's what I look at it for. But every once in a while, I get one of these goofy posts that somebody is like just whining about, don't call it handicap. These people are very sensitive. And I get on there and I'm like, just shut the fuck up. Like that is so far from my brain. Like I do not
Right.
care, like figure out things to make things better. I don't want a parking spot that is in front by the store. I don't care. If I'm going to go to Costco, I'm going to bust around the whole store. What do I need to be
Hmm.
by the door for? Put
Hmm.
one at the back of the place because no one's going to try and steal that thing or abuse it. And then I can have a spot to get out of the vehicle with the extra.
Right.
So those are the things that bother me. And then 99% of the time, I don't even think about that stuff. So like
Yeah.
it's not a thing. When I talk to my African American friends, I had a guy on the podcast who teaches Black history in the Chicago public school system. He does not care if you call him Black, Brown, African American. We're not in the 1950s, so you better not call him a Negro or anything like
Right.
that. Like that's, a little bit weird. But this woke, I think the left is got a marketing problem, and it's the wokeness thing. Like this hypersensitive, if you don't want to be called a snowflake, stop acting like that. Like
Yeah.
that. And then
Well, it goes into writing too, like the cancel culture, that some
yes,
things out there that just get eviscerated from, the social media and things like that. And then you have maybe an author saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wrote that. I'm sorry, I did that." And I think you're onto it. There's a fine line with that. Like there's some things that I really agree with, like, but I also think that it's a way to really destroy the imagination too. So, for instance, I have different fiction out there that I'm trying to find publishers for and things like that. And I have one trilogy that the protagonist is an African American teen, and he's a black kid, you know, and I'm in his head. He's my main character. That's my point of view character the whole trilogy, and I love this boy. And so for instance, as I could be so far from that, I clearly don't have that life experience. I'm a white woman,
Right.
and middle-aged white woman. So, but I can imagine it. And so what if that got, you know, that could be very much criticized and be canceled because I haven't lived as a black teen.
Sure.
But then on the flip side, I'm not going to choose to write from the first person perspective. So I did this, I did this. I would feel inauthentic to do that. It would take, I would criticize myself for that, because that's giving some authorship, you know, you can't help it. If you read something written in first person, you're going to really feel like the author had some of those experiences, or you're going to feel like the author somewhat is that character or had some authentic life experience to make that story. So I think that, yeah, I totally agree. I think it's just this mix, you know, and so you want to have diverse characters, and you want to have something that reflects humanity as it is, and, you know, that's different colors,
So do
that's
you research
different
this?
genders, different sexuality, things like that. But
Right.
then, you know, you also can only, you know, can an author also then imagine what it's like? The other thing that I think also helps is, you know, you don't write, I didn't take that story and write it like I'm living in an inner city, and I went like The Hate U Give, that kind of story. It's a sci-fi story. So those kinds of things can help you make those imaginative leaps. So I know what you mean. It's a mix between that, yeah, I was just talking about this with my daughters, of the over woke culture. You know, it's
I think it's counterproductive. I have
mhm.
so I derive my left values that I have, or political ideology, honestly, because I believe it's things that work to make the world a better place.
Yeah,
So, and it's really less about like I don't want to say it's less about somebody's feelings, because like my problem is that as soon as you say like that, I posted something about this phony war on Christmas thing. That's not a thing. Like, that's something that somebody on the right made up, and then anytime that some overwoke person plays into that narrative, you're helping them. Stop
right.
talking like that, because there are no. Well, I'll see someone that says, "Oh, I was at work and I said Merry Christmas, and this lady, she blew up at me." And I'm like, okay, first off, let's just stop you there. The woman's obviously got mental problems, because
Right.
a sane person would not blow up at you for saying something like Merry Christmas.
Right.
Unless the situation is, that person is a Muslim, or that person
Right.
is Jewish,
Yeah.
and every single day you walk by and go, Merry Christmas, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Antagonistic.
another thing, right? If you're
Yeah.
if you're antagonizing them and you're leaving that out of the story, then maybe I believe it then. But do I believe that you're the cashier at Meijer, and someone walks in, gets a gallon of milk, you're like, Merry Christmas, and they turn around and give you the what for because you said Merry Christmas? No, I
Right.
don't believe. And if they did, there's some deep underlying problem. But I'll
Right.
get someone that'll come into that thread and argue that you need to care about these people's feelings, and I'm like, whoa, you just made this outlandish statement that she made legitimate by defending the other, just don't even do it. It's nonsense. My left feelings are more like economic. I know
Hmm.
for sure that trickle down economics doesn't work. I know for sure if
Right.
I give the CEO all the money in the world and every tax break, he's not going to hand out raises. He's
No.
just going to buy a yacht and that's it. So, you know, I want like, and I mean, I'm real far left economically. Like if someone said billionaire is running for anything, I'm like, don't vote for him. That's not they're a parasite on society. There's no reason for those people to exist. And I'm not saying the human being shouldn't exist. I'm saying we should have a tax system that makes it damn near impossible for a billionaire to be a billionaire. Like
Yes.
guys that make $11 billion a year, I have no idea why anybody that even took a basic economics course thinks that that's a good idea. There's a guy
Right.
sitting on a literal mountain of money, and there's other people that can't afford to get an education and all this other stuff. It just
Right.
doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
Right. So, and I think it's also, it's not sustainable for the billionaire even. Sooner or later, Walmart's going to run out of customers because no one has any money but them.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. But if you really start to like, you know, smoke a little weed and then start thinking about money in general, you can start being like, there's almost no reason for money because this whole thing is, you know, if I just keep, if I have to give it back in taxes so they have money to buy my stuff, then what am I doing? Why am I? You know, so it's all a real deep, you know, and those are the conversations that I love to have. I
Right.
like for people to philosophize about why do we do this like this, and then wonder about how would life be 2,000 years from now, and humans, if we haven't like killed ourselves on the planet yet,
Right. For the planet.
how
Mhm.
right, how would societies be? Because it seems to me that the way we do this, especially if you go to an inner city or something like that, see tent cities, sooner or later this is not sustainable. What
Exactly.
we're doing is not going to work.
Right.
So I want to get back to the poetry stuff. Do you do any research? So your protagonist is a young teenage Black person. Do you talk to them and see how they feel, or do you just feel
I
like
do a lot of research depending on what I'm doing. Absolutely. I do all I can to get into, I've done interviews before. I taught in Milwaukee here for, 11, 12 years. So full-time and part-time with small schools that were focused, they were in partnership with the public school system, but they were small settings geared to help at-risk students. So at-risk would mean behind in grade level and skills, or could be a teen parent, someone who is truant. So the demographic was mainly Black kids in the schools where I taught. So I had, and it was such a small setting that, I mean, was more than just student teacher relationship. They're like family, you know. We still say our Nova family, and with a lot of just not the teachers but the students in the Nova Tech family where I taught, the students are a part of me in a way that my family is, you know, and
sure?
sometimes more than some people you are actually, you know, maybe related to, and it's
I
those
can get that.
adopted families.
Like, right, if I have a choice, my family is not somebody that I like. Those are people that I was like, even as a teenager, I'm like, these are the people that somebody just gave me. I didn't choose these people.
You can't pick your family.
No,
You know?
right. I have these
They always
people
say.
until I can drive, and then I don't have to deal
Yeah.
with
Yeah. Anyway,
but my
I'm
friends.
very close to my family, so like
Sure.
you know, so I have that too. But I am not a person who is blood is thicker than water or whatever that saying. You know, I am.
Right.
Blood is irrelevant with the connection, the soul connections I have with so many of my former students and the people I taught with in such a close setting, and it was magical. So I guess I do have that experience, and so for that particular character, few students probably informed, but he is unique. I think the thing is, when you create a fictional character, it starts from maybe, you know, it's not going to be this carbon copy of like a person that, you know, you're creating the
Sure.
person. And so,
I don't think it's as difficult as if you're an empath where you really are
yeah,
trying to feel for somebody like that. Like a good example for me is male to female, right? Like
hmm
you can't as a male, and I mean, I'm 6 foot tall. I, walked around with a like 30-inch waist. I was a 195-pound guy. I was trained to fight. I was never afraid anywhere that I went, right?
right.
But then, like, and I don't think until I was like in my 30s did I think about the most dangerous thing on the planet to a woman is a man.
Yeah,
So, like, there's certain situations that, like, so I would almost equate that to like a black person and a cop, right? There's certain situations that they are uber aware that they're in this situation. Like, if you're, I don't know what your stature is or anything like that, but if you're in a situation where you're maybe somewhere alone with somebody at night in a building that nobody's in, you have to be sort of aware that there could
yes,
be, right. And for me, if I was alone in a building, I'd be like, oh, what kind of trouble can I get into? Like,
yeah,
like I'm not worried about anybody coming out of the corner or doing anything weird. But when you're a woman, you have to be worried that way. And, people, I think some guys, they watch too many movies and they see some woman like beating up guys and stuff like that. And I was in combat sports. That's not a thing like that. You know what I mean? Like
well,
if I was to punch a woman, she's falling down. It's not
yeah, there's
great.
just some physical
Right.
mass difference, right?
Right. Right.
You
So
just can't get around some of that.
when I saw stuff like, women that are accusing someone of rape or accusing someone of sexual harassment, I look at him and I'm like, this is a brave person because she's putting her neck out for everything. She's gonna get backlash from
Oh, big time.
Neanderthal women who think that she's just out for a buck or something like that.
Right,
And then she's definitely gonna get it from knuckle dragging dudes that just can't even wrap their brain around this
right.
situation where she went to work every day and felt like she was being overbearing on, as far as like some guy was there wanting something from her. And then the positions of power and stuff like that. I've always been the boss. Like it's never
Yeah,
been
so you don't have those, right,
right. So
right.
like if you give me a time to sit down with someone and try and like absorb that. When I sat down with Kwame for the podcast, I've been friends with the guy for years. I've talked to him. His son wrestled.
Mhm.
I never really sat, but we talked about racism. We talked about, and I was like, this is a guy that every single morning he wakes up and he can't get out of that. He can't
Right,
not be that. And to go somewhere and have a certain percentage of the population lock their door, think that
right.
this guy's not a problem. This guy's an upstanding citizen for sure. It has to be disheartening in a way that's
Yeah,
almost, I would think some people might be defeated by it. Like, just like,
right.
forget it. I'll just be what they want me to be. And I'll do that.
Yeah,
Right. So I can empathize with that situation. So I don't think that you're any, like, for me, and I know you were talking about cancel culture. I don't think that anybody's out of line if they're trying to bring
hmm
those feelings to the forefront of something, whether you're
bring a story forth.
right. I
Hmm.
think it's great. I think it's a great angle. Now, I think there's racism on both sides. I don't think that white people deal with racism anywhere like black people do. But
No,
I have met black people who have been raised not to like white people because of
yeah.
things that happen. And I mean, maybe
Well,
they're justified in it.
there it it's different though, because they're in a society that has is systemically oppressive and is, it's never you can't compare. I'm not saying that people are not, if you might not have those, you might have those feelings or raised a certain way, but I'm sure that there's just a life experience behind them too, to
Sure.
see, that you just drive through the inner city to few blocks, you're in these very affluent neighborhoods where everyone's white. There's just these divisions that are inherent and that go through our economics, through our education system, through everything, healthcare. You don't want to the percentage of Black women who don't feel like they're heard or treated well. It's no matter what a white person says, they can't say anything because they have never been treated poorly because of their skin color, so.
Right. That's the whole, people talk about, well, I must have left my white privilege somewhere because I had to work hard all day. And I'm always like, but you got a job, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I can't stand when white people say like, well, I've had it hard, and that's not what the Black Lives Matter movement is saying. That is not, just for one, shut up and listen, for one thing. And then two, it's not about your life. It's not about your experience. There's all this, and it gets into the whole, American individualism and me, and making it, that's like the opposite of the empath, but saying, but I've had it hard, and that it's completely just flying over the point. And you can get into those conversations with people that is just so frustrating.
And I mean, Jenny, I blame the generation before us. The 80s was like, there's a documentary on Showtime or something right now about the Reagans. And like, there are right wingers that think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think he's awful. I think he's the most horrendous, one of the worst presidents we've ever had. It was a complete charade that this guy was an actor, and like they put him out there. They said, we can put millions of dollars behind this actor guy and he'll act like the cowboy and all this other nonsense. And he was horrible as far as Black people went. And he was horrible as far as homosexual people went. The guy wouldn't say AIDS for the longest time. He wouldn't even say the word. So like, he was a bad president. And he started to set us on this course where we cared more about corporate America than we did about people as far as that went. So, he was bad news as far as I go, but Ronnie's there somehow, their hero. I think that if I was trying to get this like big picture thing going on, right? And if I look at it and I say, okay, if you're running around town and you're waving your American flag, screaming, we're number one, America number one, all it's like silly stuff that doesn't matter anyway. First off, you're obnoxious. Second off, can you list what we're number one at? Because you're going to be wrong. And secondly, if you wanted to be, or thirdly, if you want to be number one, wouldn't trying to educate the people that get the least amount of education, have the least amount of options from the word go, wouldn't that make America better? If you could bring
Absolutely.
the bottom up, that would be the thing that would make it better. Because just 20 years from then, you would start to see more scientists, the whole thing right now. I've read some books like history stuff, and I hate to be one of these people that's like, this is worse than ever, because it's not. There were times in the country that were worse, that we've definitely made progress on race. I mean, homosexuality's come out of the closet, for lack of a better phrase. But we can do so much better than this.
Oh, absolutely.
And it seems like even the people don't read any history. The wealth gap, like Rockefellers and those people were actually a lot wealthier in comparison to regular people than say Bezos is. And Bezos is like ludicrously wealthy. Like it's way out of line. So yeah, I mean, I think art is definitely a way to do that. I just think there's certain people you're just never going to get through. Like
yeah. And I think, in this political setting we've been in, you just have so much divisiveness, and there's just so much, and we're being fed, we're looking at different media for one,
Yes. Oh gosh.
Have
you seen the exodus? So Facebook has actually gotten a little bit better because all these real wackadoos exited to Parler to go get their, like crazy tinfoil hat shit on, and no one's ever going to put like a fact check below one of their posts, that says Hillary Clinton eats babies. Like they're just going to say that. And then also I did see a couple of people that were coming back from Parler and like, oh, forget that. All it is people screaming obscenities because there's no check. You can say whatever you want to someone and they won't like boot you. They won't, none of that stuff. So they're there and they're like, it's just the Wild West as far as crazy goes. And I'm like, that's not good. And then,
No.
So the internet has been awesome as far as like me and my sons are, I mean, we shouldn't, but we do. We have our phones with us all the time. And we're constantly looking up things. Like we're science nerds, right? So like we're always looking up sciencey stuff. We're looking up, like today we were looking up, like, somebody was saying that how do we get a English bulldog from a gray wolf? Like that seems crazy that because every canine came from a gray wolf. Well,
right.
Until you break it down and start looking at stuff, yeah, but there are 30 different canines that first came from a gray wolf. You got like a fox, a coyote, all these other things that look totally different. And then the dogs came off of those lines. So you had millions of years of evolution that you got. And then you started working to make an English bulldog or a Chihuahua or thing like that. Those are things that me and my sons do with the internet. Things other people do with the internet are insane.
No, not the same.
No, not the same at all. Somebody sent me a link this morning, and she's a dear friend. I love her. But she sent me a QAnon one, which it's my guilty pleasure that I love to like look at it because it is the most batshit crazy stuff that you could ever think of. It is straight up like, it's a cult. And it is, somebody needs to put out a book on what a cult is so you could recognize it when it shows up in front of you. Because cults do things like, I'm the only one with the truth. And they do things where they ask questions and then they know your tendency where you're going to go with the answer. So they ask the question, and then it's almost like that movie Inception, where they make you think that you thought of it.
Right. But that's being controlled. Right. That's
you're
so insidious.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy. This link was like 40 minutes long, and it was like, it was everywhere. It was chemtrails and like the whole thing, which to me, it's like a train wreck. I can't stop looking at it, but it also scares me a little bit because people believe it.
That's the scariest thing to me. Yeah.
And Jenny, they're believing things that like, I would guess that you're paying attention to the current administration that's on its way out right now. And that thing to me, here is a man who has never failed to take credit for anything he ever did, which he did very little. And he took credit for things that he didn't do. And they believe he's a secret agent who is going to like get rid of all pedophiles, and he's not going to take any credit for it. If he was doing that, he would be telling you every day that he was doing that, and he's not.
Because he's so self-important.
Yes, narcissistic, like, and he's got this like, I don't know. I made a career as a young man out of like finding people who were fake, and then getting them to go on the parking lot and get beat up. So like, it's somebody that was fronting. I didn't get that was puffing his chest out and stuff like that. I'm like, about 10:30, that's going to be my guy right there. I'm going to go, we're going to go out in the park. We're going to find out. And Donald Trump's that guy. He's fake. It's all paper mache. It's all just fake. Mm-hmm. And these people believe it so much. And some of them they're not dumb people. Like I know them personally. And when they tell me that, or when I see a post and I'm like, oh, no, you believe all that weirdness? And it's hard for me to swallow. It's like, I can't square it. I can't wrap my brain around how somebody intelligent could do it.
Yeah. I think too, and I talk about this a lot, like we're not, I don't know if there's just some misconnect sometimes between, and then I know the callback on what I'm going to just say, I can tell you what people would say to this when I say finding credible sources, then people might say, oh, well, it's a leftist media.
Yeah. Oh,
There's
that
no, that so I can see where this is going to ping pong and things like that. So
the
sometimes
fake
those
news
arguments,
out
but I
is.
can say this as a writer, I, because, so this is, we've talked about my creative stuff.
Mhm.
I'm also mainly an educational writer because my
Okay.
background was in teaching. So the freelance work I do is mainly, not completely, but writing for textbooks or tests or those children's books you mentioned, the Barack Obama, those are nonfiction for kids.
Yeah.
They could maybe use in a classroom, things like that. So, in my job, I can't just, well, I can't use Wikipedia. I can't use just any old whatever off the internet blog or whatever post things people are putting up. I have to go to credible sources. So, like if it's a government site or if it's out of a university or an encyclopedia, like where's the misconnect sometimes I think with being able to like really track down and fact find about and fact and and then also when you said, do you ever interview people? Yeah, getting like real life experience or interviews or things like that, but you can't always do that. But being able to discern what is a credible source. And I feel like there is some disconnect with some people with that.
Well, there's also this situation where, like, I like Google. I'm on Google. Like, if you look at my computer and like the thing is in popularity, Google's always like second or third on. Like, I'm always Googling something. But the way that I use a search engine like that is I use it, especially if it's something where I'm trying to find a fact. Too many people search for the answer, so they have
Yeah.
the answer that they want, and then you can find that because some Nimrod is writing that opinion
Mm-hmm.
piece that you want to read, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's fact then, and it's not
Right.
fact, it's just another
Tell
opinion
me the
piece.
answer I want to hear.
Right. So they
Yeah.
find the thing they want to find, and I'm like, there needs to be in high school now, because this is a fact of life. Like, search engines are a thing that we're going
Yes.
to use and they're going to be there. There needs to be like a class on, I don't care if it's a quarter or a semester or whatever it is, on how to properly use a search engine. Because
Yeah.
for me, it's absolutely, I can throw my ideology out the window. It's the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you're wrong and you're saying this thing on social media that
Mm-hmm.
absolutely like triggers me. I get like a little bonkers. Like, I'm like, that's not right at all. Like,
Right.
you can't back that up. You can't quantify that with anything. You're
Right.
saying it. So here I am. I got to stop what I'm doing because I have to, and I see you like liking things and stuff like that, but you don't ever get in the weeds. You don't ever like, and I can't help myself. I have to get in there and be like, this can't be like this. So like, there needs to be a way where, my line for those people is always toughen up, buttercup. You just because you're not getting the answer you like doesn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
you need to throw a fit or any of that kind of stuff. You're just wrong, and deal with it, because that's how it is. So like, and I have been wrong. I have looked up stuff and I've been like, oh, I had a conversation about guns with somebody, and I thought that most illegal guns were obtained by the means of I broke into somebody's house and I stole their guns. They're
Mm.
not. They're mostly obtained by straw purchasers. So a guy that's a felon gets his brand new girlfriend who's not a felon to get a FOID card or
Oh, right. That
whatever.
makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
They just have them straw purchase the weapons, and sometimes they drive around to multiple gun stores by filling up a trunk full of guns. Then they take them to the city to the gang members, and that's
Wow.
how they get them. But I did not know that. It seemed like that was a less feasible way than I just break a window and then steal the guy's guns. So, but I was going on logic, and that's the other problem. That's the problem with these QAnon things, is they try and prey on, there's a lot of people that think you can figure anything out with logic, and you can't. Like, there are
Mm.
things that if you don't know anything about it, we build stuff. I can give you all the material twice, and if you don't know anything about carpentry, it's not going to happen. You're not going to
No.
build it because it's not logic. It's a system of things that I learned over time. And
Right.
the research is the same thing. You need to learn from what happened, from people that were there,
Yes.
and all this other stuff. So for you, I'm surprised that the current situation on social media doesn't drive you more batty than it drives me, because
You
you're driving.
know, it does. I limit my social media big
Yeah.
time. Like I'll go on. And sometimes I'll have periods where I'll go several days. I will not even look at it, because it just, well, it'll send you into a spiral, and some of it is too, I'm a single parent. I don't have tons of time. And so am I going to spend my time in, like you said, getting in the weeds and getting in these, because I've done it, and then you're in this all day and it's consuming and it goes nowhere and
Yep.
it becomes kind of a waste of time, and I
It
don't
is.
have a lot of time. So,
Oh.
and it's too, I'm very, very protective of creative space. So it's, if I'm going to be creating something and writing every day, I don't want like that to infect it. And so sometimes, I mean, if something really angers me, I will say something. Or if there's someone who does something that I think is out of hand, I'll call that person on it. But I find I don't like to get in the back and forth. I did it earlier, what Facebook especially has been around. I can't even remember, 2009 or something.
Sure.
And what I would probably engage in, years ago, I'm just a lot less hands
Oh,
off
I'm a
type of
lot. I'm
thing.
actually a lot less now too. I think I had more time on my hands at one time too, so I did it. And for me back then, it really reading is a thing that I like to do, and I was turned on to it by someone I dated years ago. Like I would read stuff before that was nonfiction. I always felt like I don't have time to read things that are novels and stuff like fiction.
Mm,
I always felt like I want to read something about Lincoln, something about Washington,
sure.
some historical figure or a battle or something like that. And then someone turned me on to novels, and I was like, wow, this is actually so much better, because
Hmm.
it's fiction, but it is there's way more emotion that goes on in it. Sometimes
Right.
a nonfiction writer doesn't really delve into the emotion of what's happening in the time. They just tell you what happened and how the story went and stuff like that.
Right.
And you kind of become like Spock, where you're just like, very logically thinking about the things. And my favorite author, and it's an old one, is John Irving. Like
Oh, he's so
I don't think
good.
there's anything I've ever read, and I've read a dozen of his books, novels, that I love them all. And it's, for me, he just fits like the categories. So, wrestling's a big part of our life. There's always usually wrestling in his books. There's my grandparents spoke German. I try and teach myself German every chance I get. And there's always someone speaking Austrian or German or something like that in the books
Mm,
too. There's all kinds of like romance, and then he's it's weird because he's a writer that's mostly, I guess, prevalent in the 80s and early 90s,
yeah.
but he's really open-minded about sexuality and like all
Yes.
kind of things. So like
Yeah.
I really dig his writing. And I never, as a guy in my 20s or teens, would have thought I would ever utter the words, "I have a favorite author." Like that doesn't, you know what I mean? Like,
Do you
um,
like historical fiction, Bill?
I do. And I like, so like, if someone writes something that is what you're saying about that, that's like, it takes a historical event, but it makes a fictional story inside that event.
Hmm.
Okay, yeah, those are awesome. And then I do like a movie like that too. Like I like a
Yeah.
Tarantino, where the Inglorious Bastards, where he totally changes
Right.
the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I could watch that over and over again. Some of that though is visual. Like I like that mid-century modern look, and then the clothes,
Hmm.
cars, and all that stuff. But the book thing sort of ruined some movies for me. Like I read oh god, somebody's man, it was a Nicolas Cage movie, but I read the book first. It was somebody's mandolin. I can't believe remember what it was, but it's
Oh,
it's a story off an island in Italy, a Greek island in Italy, and this, why can't I think of it? But it was one of the first novels that I read, and then I had a visual picture of who these characters were in my head.
Oh, right.
And when they put them on the TV, I wanted to kill the casting person.
Yeah, because you're like, this is just wrong. Yeah.
Did you not read the book?
Yeah.
This is not that guy. Nicolas Cage is not that guy. Like, that can't be the guy. So, like, but I always think that's pretty cool. And then I still do, like, I listen to many podcasts. I don't know if I'd like there to be another hour in each day if I could get it. Like, if somehow we could work where we do daylight savings every single day, an extra hour, I'd be thrilled. Because, you know, there's just not enough time. But I listen to podcasts, and then I try and listen to some books on audio, and I'm listening to what is it? Zim's A People's History. It's the one that's from Good Will Hunting, where he said you want to read a book, pull your hair back, and read that. And I have that on audio. So if we take a trip anywhere, I'm listening to that, and that is history from another perspective and history about things that we didn't want to talk about before. Right. So it's pretty cool too. So there's so much good stuff out there, and the internet is that too. Yeah. Spend their time on just crap. Like, it's amazing to me that they'll waste time on stuff like that. And you're like 100% correct. I have started where I look at my timer on my apps, and I'm like, all right, I'm not going to go past 30 minutes a day. Right. And then my problem is I'll get some meathead trying to call me out, like, where you been? And everything else. And I'm like, all right, I got to go back on there because this guy thinks like he's right, and he's not right. But it's a time suck. It's the worst thing ever. Like, the social media thing's terrible. And then the other thing that's really bad, and I don't want to say it's bad, like, because I'm not one of these people that would say, like, video games and violence in movies and pornography or anything. Like, I don't find that bad in small doses. But, like, I had a friend of mine who, I think I talked about this last night, who told me he watches pornography for like 8 hours a day. And I was like, wow. Yes, right. That face says it all. Whoa. I raised eyebrows, and I looked at him, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, your brain's got to be mush. Like, everything about what you're doing, you understand that's how do you function around a woman now? Because, like, yes, it's all a mess. And he's like, and he was like, I got a problem. And I'm like, you have a problem, and you need to stop doing that, because that's going to ruin you on everything. I don't know how you're ever going to have a conversation with a woman. I don't know how you're ever going to actually have meaningful sex in your life, because that's not it. Like, that ain't it at all. And I mean, now it's readily available. I don't know if you have sons, but it's like, what kids wise, what do you have? 3 girls. Oh, 3 girls. Right. So dangerous for them, because they have to live in a world where the boys that they're dealing with, that's what they're dealing with. And then secondly, like, I got my boys, I pulled them aside, and I'm like, hey, there's this thing out there. It's like this. I'm sure you've looked at it because you've got phones and you're, doing whatever, and you're teenagers. Just talk to me about it. That's not reality. That's not real. Right. There's no woman that wants that. And if you find one that does, you should probably not be there for very long, because that's not good. And I go, it's not good for you, son, because you're going to miss out on the beauty of the real thing that could happen. I mean, there's, nothing more spectacular than the connection between a man and a woman like that. And the pornography misses all of it. It's all about taboo and nonsense and just weirdness. Just, it's odd. But you can go down rabbit holes of between the QAnon thing, the pornography. There's a million YouTube videos that are just at flat earth, just nonsense. And people turn their brains to mush on that stuff. Right. How is it? That's what's going to lead me back to literature and writing and stuff like that. Like, has that fallen off dramatically because there's so much more available to do? You mean, do I think like more people? If you took me and you back 40 years, right? Took us into another generation,
Hmm.
we would have far more time to read a novel or a poem or whatever like that
Sure.
because there's 4 channels on the TV.
Yeah, I think parents really struggle with that, right? You hear how to get my kid to read and things like that. I I think that yes, I think that there are a lot of people who maybe aren't reading, but then I also know a lot of readers and young readers and kids who are just they get the right book and they're in, they're just and they a couple years ago I took my daughters to see Rick Riordan. I don't know. Have you heard of him?
Oh,
He's a uh, he writes for kids, but he reimagines the Greek myths. Oh, The Lightning Thief.
oh,
That was a movie.
The Percy stuff, the
The
movie.
Percy Jackson and the
Got it,
Olympians.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I we just love his books, the girls and I. And so he came to Milwaukee, and I was such a geek. I was in tears, like just looking at all the kids in there because he has this Camp Half Blood where all the demigods go and train, and
Okay,
we
sure.
all wore our Camp Half Blood orange T-shirts, and there are
Nice.
all these kids, and it was just magical, and it was packed, and they sold out right away. It was through our independent Boswell here in Milwaukee, and so I like to. And so, yeah, I think kids, like everyone else, there are so many competing things of what we could do to spend our time. It's everything we do is a choice. And I think, especially with the pandemic, we've had just so much more time, just in terms of like, especially if you're working more at home and you just don't even, you cut out the commute, just that alone. How
Yeah.
much time did you commute? You have this
Yep.
time, you can
Yep.
fill it. Yeah. And, but I think I'm always hopeful for literature. I'm always hopeful that it's going to, because, and I think it shows with the pandemic how many more people are reading poetry or turning to poetry or turning to stories or listening to different audiobooks they would have never. I've been addicted to this one actor who I heard him, I got an audiobook where he read an Agatha Christie book because I love the Agatha Christie books. So I'm like, I just need something just chill. That I love this. I know the story and it's going to relax. And this actor, and I've seen him in period pieces before. I'm just totally in love with his voice. So like, I'm starting to
Who's the actor?
I want to hear Richard Armitage, and so I'm now exposed to different stories I hadn't heard before just because I want to hear his voice.
Nice, nice, nice. No, hey, that's something that's cool. So my sons are different for sure, like different than they definitely read more than me. They're far better students than I was. And like so people around us were worried when we took a gap year because of COVID. And really
Yeah.
it had more to do with wrestling. And then I also wanted my sons to get the whole college experience. They're both going to go
Yeah.
away to school, and I wanted you to go like live away at
Right.
school. And I knew that if I sent you away this time, you'll be back in a month, and it's not going to work out. You're going to do e-learning.
Yeah.
So like, let's just see if they can't come out with a vaccine, and then you'll wait a year and go. And people were like, you better be careful because, well, I shouldn't say that. Most people were, that's an awesome idea. That's great. They're going to get money to work. They're going to get a skill.
Yeah.
They're gonna do all these other things. And I go, yeah, the only thing that kind of sucks is they can't travel. They can't do anything
Right.
because it's a mess. So, but they took this time off. But the concern with the people that were concerned was that they would fall into working and then they wouldn't want to go to school. And I was like, not worried about that. I know my sons, they're both very much looking, they want to be engineers. They're super sciencey geeks as far as that stuff goes. Like the dead of winter, or not dead of winter, like when the lockdown first happened in the early spring, we came back here and they're like doing electrical engineering projects out in the garage and like, stuff they're like sending away to Amazon stuff to get, different parts that they're making, do things and stuff like that. And then they're like, hey, we got all those 2x4s out there. Can I build a catapult? And I'm like, go ahead. So they built this like big, huge catapult that was throwing a tennis ball, like, 100 yards out onto the lake. And the dog loved it because he's going out there to get it. But that's what they occupy their time with. And I know that when it comes time to go back to school, they're looking forward to it. And then
Yeah.
the other reason for the gap year was wrestling because I don't want to lose a year of that because you can never have that back. You can
Right.
go back to college when you're 40, but you're not going to wrestle again. So,
No.
so
So
that's
they'll
just,
be able to wrestle next year.
yes, right.
Yeah.
They'll be able to wrestle. And their coaches were not very understanding about it. They were like, no, 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 come to school. We don't care if, the year, don't worry if the year doesn't happen, won't lose your eligibility. And I'm like, but do you want to go to college for a 5th year? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, so then like, just take the year. And I guess from what I heard in Europe, that's a much more normal thing to do, is to take 1 year
Yeah.
between high school and
Yeah.
college and like go travel, do things. So I'm perfectly fine. They're going to go. And I have been pleasantly surprised to like bust down to their room to go get them. And somebody's reading a book. And I'm like, hey, look at you just reading the book. Now there have been times where someone's reading something. I'm like, what are you reading? And it's like some wacky, and I'm like, no, like that. And it's like, it's political, or it's like, it's just, there's definitely times too where I've gone to the gym and like my one son's looking at, a podcast that Alex Jones is on. And I'm like, he's nuts, right? Like, just make sure you understand he's crazy. And they're like, he's saying some things. And I go, hey, everybody popular that says crazy things, there's a little nugget of truth in all of it, because that's how he hooks the people into listening to the crazy stuff. And, he's like, all right. And I'm like, I want you to make your own decisions, but, just, I'm not lying to you, and I got no reason to.
Right.
But so I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of books that they've picked up. So to me, that was good. I am amazed because I think that me as a young person, like, I mean, I read the stuff we're supposed to read for school, Call of the Wild, and all the things that they handed.
Yeah.
But I wasn't reading on my spare time. Like, that was not a thing I was doing. I was, out and doing stuff and had places to go, and then work, and everything else. The audio book, are any of your books on, or your
No.
Nothing's audio? Okay. So, okay. Cause I find it odd when there's an author that's a prominent author. Like, I've never done a John Irving book on audio, but I would fully expect him to do the audio.
Sometimes they do, I've noticed they do, but then I think they're really, as audiobooks have grown in popularity, probably through Audible mainly. But I mean, they've been around. I think too, a thing that kind of tipped it over was the Jim Dale reading Harry Potter series. I don't know if we're total Harry Potter geeks over here, and we listened to those, not just read them, but listening. And Jim Dale, like, the way he would change each character's voice was so amazing. And I feel like that kind of tipped the audiobook world over to, you had more actors, true actors coming in and getting, being the readers. And then you'd have more people maybe wanting to listen because they know the actor or actress.
See, now for me, I would swing more towards the Tolkien stuff, the Lord of the Rings. And like, that to me is more, my style of, like, maybe it's more action or whatever, but the Harry Potter thing, I'm like, you nerds, like, that's like a, more nerdy thing.
Yeah, it is. Oh, you don't get, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan too. You're a geek too.
I mean, yeah, you could be a total geek on that too. And like, that's another thing that's kind of, so that's some of the like societal progress that I've seen too. I don't know how your parents were, but my father was certainly, there was a certain element of racism that, and he's a left-wing guy, but there's still a certain element of racism that he grew up, the guy born in 1949, he had a certain amount of racism. His father had more than he had, and I have less. And some of it for me is more like, some of my closest friends were black guys and stuff. Like, I dated black women, like, not a racist guy really. I understand it exists and stuff, but like, growing up, when I grew up, if you saw an interracial couple, you definitely took a double take or like took a note of who's doing that sort of thing. My sons say it's not even.
I think that has been such a big progress. It's just,
Right.
It becomes a well, we have kids about the same age. Like, my oldest is 18, and my youngest is 11, and it's not a thing. And they just, everything's just mixed, and then, and two, I see a big difference with, sexuality too, that's really different,
Yeah.
where I feel like, there's definitely more progress. Now, of course, in different, more conservative, maybe smaller towns, and ones where, really conservative Christian or other conservative religions that shun maybe, homosexuality, things like that. You're not going to see it. But I think for the most part, yeah, kids are like, whatever, be who you are, date who you want. And I think that's huge progress from when we were growing up and where we grew up. I mean, really.
Well, even the transgender thing is
right.
For my sons. Like they say, there's all kinds of people that are at school that are that way. And like I had a guy on the podcast who was a woman that I went to school with, and I knew her then, and there was always something that was a little off. Like it was not right as far as it went. And you could tell that she wasn't falling into and she was dealing with something too. And now that she's a guy, like it really was not, it wasn't hard too, because she's got a beard and everything when she came for the podcast. And then we went through everything. He was very down to earth, and even dealt with mentally some of the things that people that aren't in his shoes deal with. Like there's the children out there that some parents are telling them when they're 5 and 6 that you're a girl and it's a boy. And I don't know if that's right. I don't know if, there could be a time where you're just a little confused or something like that. And like we went over how it's a setback to go all the way through puberty and then start to transition. Because as a woman, you get the breast, you get the bigger hips, all the things that you don't want because you identify as a boy. But you got to get to a place where you're an adult, where you can make those permanent decisions to begin with.
Right.
So there's this double-edged sword, but he was like totally like, I'm not for that. I think that the person needs to be a mature adult before they can make, and he's like, it made it harder because, she was top heavy and stuff like that. And like if she would have, when she was she started taking hormones as a 12-year-old, which he said at 12, 13, I knew. And I'm like, so did we. We saw you and we kind of knew too. But still had to wait until
maturation.
Like 30. Right. So like there's this fine line that it's almost like you don't know what to do. I certainly feel for those people, and I certainly don't think anybody would do that as a choice. Like doesn't seem like a thing that you'd want to have happen to you.
Well, it's a hard road, right?
Yes.
I think that people have to answer what's inside of them. And I think, one thing that has to be said is that if anytime you're going to choose a road that's going to make life a lot more difficult for yourself, then you really must feel that. And then that's what you have to do. And what I like is just the fluidity with, and again, it's not completely, you're going to have people who are judgmental, but just fluidity about what people want to wear and how they want to present themselves. And I think that's, of course, there are going to be really hateful, mean-spirited people who judge, but I think for the most part, and again, I'm a really open-minded person, so I have really open-minded kids, and they're going to be probably around more open-minded kids, so maybe I don't have a true perspective.
Your lifestyle too had to lend itself to more where you had time. Because of the injury for me, I had time on my hands to actually have more conversations with my sons about these things. So, and we were up late last night, probably like 2 a.m. I was talking with my one son, and we always kind of like delve into this thing, like who would my sons be if I never got injured? And I'm like, guys, I don't really know. They're outstanding wrestlers. I don't know if I would have had the time to put into that the same way, because I worked 80 hours a week in the field. like, I didn't want to
Yeah.
be a parent that wasn't there, but I'm
Right.
pretty sure I would have used the excuse of I'm putting a roof over their head, all that other bullshit, to
Sure.
neglect them completely. Like, it would have been a bad deal.
Right.
Where they're not like that. But there are things that they don't do because I don't have, like, I'm not out hunting with them and stuff like that. They don't do those things where that's what I grew up doing. So I'm like, I don't know, you might be a better hunter, fisherman, but you might be less of a wrestler. And I go, you might be less of a student, because
Right.
I spent a lot of time, like, it almost seemed, I said these things to them when they were real little, like 6, 7, like, you're going to school now, son. I wanted them to pay attention to what I felt was important, which was science and math. And
Hmm.
someone like you would probably be like, well, what about the arts and literature and stuff like that? When they were little, I was like all just hammering science and math, science and math, science and math. And now I have 2 sons that want to be engineers. So
Yeah.
like, it's all science and math. And I kind of like screwed them up, because somewhere in their like 16, 17-year-old life, I started saying, hey, you're spending all this time on wrestling, all this time in physics class, all this time doing these things. Are you doing anything like a play or anything like, and they're like, looked at me like I was, what are you, crazy? And I'm like, no, I go, you should like look at these things, because there's a lot of things that'll help you understand life. And then when I first got injured, I took some psychology classes, and
Mm.
I dug that the most. Like, I thought this is really an inside look on how the inner workings of someone's brain, why
Right.
someone feels that way. And whenever there's some podcasts I listen to that have that sort of thing, like they go into like the tribalism that we deal with right now with political stuff has a lot to do with an evolutionary trait that was like, you have to have a tribe because you got to survive in the wilderness.
Right.
The tribe, so you got to identify as something. Um,
Right.
with the writing, are there circles of writers that you like, associate with? Like, because everyone's got their different thing, right? So like, there are people that are conservative writers. They make a buck. I mean,
Yeah.
old people buy books. So like,
Yeah. Right.
Do you have colleagues that are that, like, is there a circle of people that do you deal with people like that or no?
Well, I think my circle of people would be pretty similar, probably, if we're talking
Oh,
politically. Like,
yeah,
I
sure.
wouldn't, I would never probably buy those books or really ever see one of those writers speak or things like that. Like, and even ones who, well, like fiction, I'm trying to think, I wouldn't, like, if someone wrote, like, I don't know backgrounds and things of like all the fiction I like to read. I don't look into the author, and it's like I don't want things to be so alienated that you can't be open-minded. But I'm not going to read something like a piece of nonfiction
Okay.
from a conservative writer. That would just not be that interesting to me at all.
I think
I guess I could use it
that was
for
more
argument's sake. I would maybe read it for how to argue with someone like that.
right. But that's an oxymoron, right? I mean, conservative nonfiction, isn't it just mostly fiction? Like, I mean, honestly, it is. Like, when you like, so the books that really freaked me out were the Ayn Rand stuff.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, I never read those. Yeah.
no, okay. So I had an uncle hand me that. I got about 3/4 of the way through Atlas Shrugged, and I'm like, this is the biggest garbage that was ever written. This is like
Yeah.
just nonsense. The whole gist was that if you make life too hard on very wealthy people, they will just quit doing the things they're doing, and they're holding the world up. And my view was so the opposite of this. I'm like, if Walmart shut its doors tomorrow, the middle class would just buy stuff from Target.
Right.
But if the middle class, some disease came along and it killed all the middle class off, Walmart's done. They're not going to have anyone to sell anything to. So like this thing where if rich people, if who's being hard on them, they're rich. Like it's obvious.
It's tough life.
Well. So like, what mental gymnastics are you doing to get to this
Yeah.
point, to write these
Right.
books? And they are hugely popular with that conservative ideologue. They love those books.
Yeah.
And I had to be respectful to my uncle, but I was like, this is just garbage. This is the
Right.
like, and she's got a huge following, and that woman
Yes.
died on welfare.
Oh, wow.
Like, what are we like? So, but I guess where the question was going for me with you was like, how do you look at those authors? Like, it'd be much easier. I would be far more popular on, I don't do it for the popularity anyway, on YouTube or something like that, if all I did was conspiracy theory,
Yeah.
crazy, because those get clicks, right? People are
Right.
wanting to see. So if I would be a more popular real estate broker if I was a conservative one versus the liberal that I am. So it would financially benefit me, but I can't like morally just
Right.
that person. So like I feel fine about it. When I was working before my injury, money was a thing. I made a pretty fancy living. I had like a lot of property that I had bought, all that stuff. When I got injured, I had a lot of time to think about those things. And if someone said to me today, would you trade your body and everything else for going back to work like you used to work? And then you would sacrifice all the hours I spent with my sons and my daughter. There's no chance. There's zero chance. Now, if you found me before I was injured and said, okay, take the injury out of the equation and said, you're gonna have all this time to be at home with your kids, or you're gonna work and have, big construction jobs going on. I would have chose the construction jobs because that's the angle that I was on.
Right.
I was forced into this, but when I was forced into it, I saw the value in it.
Right.
As it goes. So, I mean, you've only got, I'm not a religious person, so I've only got this one life, right? I've only got this thing I can go around once. What you're describing as far as your lifestyle goes, that sounds appealing to me. Like, that sounds great. Do you have a good relationship with your kids as far as that goes?
Gosh, yeah. We're thick as thieves. We're pack. Yeah. We're so close.
That's great. Well, now we are and we aren't, like, there's time, we spend too much time together. So we work together and all the other stuff.
That's a lot.
There's times where they would like to kill me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm the boss, so this is how it goes. But, and that's the other problem that you have too is, I'm in charge. So
yeah,
it's just not going to work out. So we do have our little meltdowns here and there.
Sure.
I hope. So like we talked about, family for me being just, not a choice. The family that I made, my children, they're so important to me that if there's ever a rift, I sit them down and say, hey, our relationship is more important than anything that can go on. I mean, I tell them stuff like, listen, if somehow you screwed up and you killed somebody, you come talk to me. We will figure out, I'm not going to hide you or anything like that. Like, bury the bodies, but I will figure out the best path that we can take to get you back on the right path to figure this thing out. Because I'll always be there for them. There's just, as far as I can. So yeah, anyways, I veer off on stuff, which I like the podcast stuff for that. I do. And I do the podcast because I like to have the conversations, but I want to know, like, with the writing and stuff like that, you said you do the books that I saw that were online, you have another job that you do too? You said there's a teaching part of this, or?
I have taught. I haven't for a couple of years, I've just been freelancing, but I did, I taught part-time and was freelancing too, which was, teaching so consuming, that, and it ends up being full-time and part-time pay. Truthfully, that's how teaching goes. Anyone who's ever taught, they know, because you'll just end up doing more and more and more, or they'll ask you to do more and more and more. And so that wasn't exactly conducive and then plus at a couple years ago, when I talked about my mom had declined more, I wanted to be more available to help my sister with taking care of her in their home. And so freelancing helps do that. It helps, the benefits, you're creating your own schedule. And so I always think of work not really in like a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. It's more like, when in this 7-day period will I get these things done, kind of thing. But COVID's been really hard. I don't know. I'm looking now for, well, my priority is, like you were saying, being with around your kids is, with freelancing, it's just so up and down. So, and with COVID, I've noticed like 3 major projects, with educational companies, like they've been stalled, haven't come to fruition. And I think it's because of COVID, because you have, like I'll work for a company that maybe works with a bigger publisher, educational publisher. Well, maybe those people, everyone's working from home, they're doing childcare, deadlines aren't being met, and it all just kind of ripples effect. Or if people got sick, then, things aren't getting produced, where then they would hire the writers like myself in a freelance basis. So I'm casting my net. My goal is to, well, have something that I can do from home, because I can also then keep writing easily, because
Sure.
it doesn't take much to write if you just have to be focused. So even if I'm doing data entry or something like that, I could be jotting down ideas for the next scene I'm going to write when I'm on break, that kind of thing.
Okay. So is there a time, so like I had heard like high level mathematicians have a certain window in their life where they are better at that. Is there a creative, like, are there authors that write into their, like, because writing is one of those jobs that it seems like you could do it to the end. Like, there's just
I hope to, yeah.
Right. So is there a creative lull, or do you get more creative as you get more experience in life? Like, I mean, I always try and make sure that I don't become, one of the things that my pet peeves on social media are these codgers that talk about kids today. And I'm like, oh my God, you just became your grandparents. Like, you're this person I went to school with, and now you just keep talking about Tide Pods and like just this dumb stuff that, like, kids aren't like that. And if your kids are like that, then that's your fault. You know what I mean? Like, this person that's writing these things. And then the other one is the people that keep saying that kids today need a beating. And I'm like, that's too. But so is there a time in an author's life where they produce their best work and stuff like that? Or does that, I don't know how old Socrates was when he was writing stuff, and like, like how old can someone be and still produce something that's worthwhile?
Some people first publish in their 60s, I mean, that's, Alice Munro, I think, did that. She's a novelist. So I think that's what's so great about writing. It can happen at any time, if people are, it takes practice. It's like you were saying in the gym, or, you got to do your reps, you got to do your exercise. The way to get better at writing is to read a lot and to write a lot. And, so you got to do your reps, kind of thing. But,
well, even for me, for this, I got a break from podcasting for probably like 6 months or so. We were just too busy with work, and I'm a real estate broker and a contractor. So like I work a ton, but I work a ton so I have time to not work at some point during the year. Last night was my first podcast back, and I was like, whoa, like this is a skill to have a conversation with people. For me, it's not a skill to have a conversation. Like I can go day drink with a couple buddies and we can talk for 3 hours, no problem. But to have a conversation with somebody about something I don't know anything about, and someone I don't write that well, it's a skill. And I re-listened to the one last night, and I was like, oh, I'm so bad at this now. Like, and I mean, I had like 60 some odd episodes that I did before, and I felt like at a point that I got better at it.
Right.
So I'm going to cut my teeth on you again, I'm trying to get better at it again. But, so like, there will be things that I'll forget to have asked, because I find this stuff very interesting. And there's like so many people with like interesting careers and interesting things that they chose to do. And again, there's a certain amount of bravery in doing that. As a kid growing up, I loved to fish. I loved it. I mean, if it was summertime, my mom would bring me dinner at the local pond because that's where I was at fishing. Like I wasn't, I was fishing. And I remember my father, like I was probably like 13 or something. He's like, Billy, what are you going to do when you grow up? I go, I'm going to be a professional fisherman. And he's like, that's not a thing. And I'm like, what do you mean? I go, there's two guys that we watch on TV that's what they do.
Yeah.
And he goes, there's two guys and like millions and millions of people. That's not a job you can go get. I found out when I was like, 28 that was totally a job. Like people totally do that for a living. They might not be on TV, but they're like guiding. There's
right.
I could have done that. And I was aggravated, like with my father.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't care about the money. I just want to spend my time on the water and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So people that like you who went out and got the career writing and stuff like that, the longevity of it is, I mean, that's a huge bonus. That's like, I mean, if you can do
That's
this,
true.
it makes you happy. Maybe you don't need to make, and I don't know, how lucrative it is, but maybe you don't need to make, $200,000-$300,000 a year right now because you're going to string that out for the entire time as is
That's
there
a nice way to look at it, Bill.
is there any, when you say like freelance work and stuff like that, so construction, there's a lot of like spots where we make cash money and stuff like that, where it's kind of like under the table. Is there anything like that with writing?
No, at least not in the circles I'm running. There's a lot of different types of freelance writing, and I've tried to break into different niches because it might be, I don't know, construction and things like that, but like copywriting is a lot more lucrative than what I do because that's stuff that sells, like things that could sell and you could make more money. And
well,
it's just
explain that then. What is it? What is copywriting?
So for instance, like people who would be writing like a direct email to try to get people to buy things, or anything maybe on a website that's for sales. I've done some, but it's or people who maybe write for pharmaceutical companies, like describing the drugs in the pamphlets and the flyers and things like that. So if you're working for companies who make a lot of money, okay. So and you're the writer for all the materials, because if you really start looking around, it's text everywhere. Really, if you think about it, we can't get away from reading. Absolutely. I always say that to my students is like, look, I'm not saying you need to at least be at the 8th grade level because everything is written basically there. So let's get, do
you feel that
everything around you can read?
Do you feel that because of social media and the way that if somebody would have told us when we were 13, 15 years old that you were no longer going to call people, you were just going to write things.
Oh, I know.
You would be like, that seems like backwards. Like, why would I write everything I want to say when I can just say the things I want to say?
Right.
And it's inconvenient because there's times when you can't do it, but I would prefer this sort of a interaction with friends. Like I would really prefer to, I wish they would make this a better way where they could put the camera like right here so I could look at your eyes and talk to you but if I'm talking to you, I'm not looking at you, which is like another weird thing too. So, so that this is odd, but to talk to people, have a conversation with them, it's so much better than texting to begin with, but there has to be a value to the fact that like kids now are texting each other at like 8, 9, 12 years old. They're texting. So they're constantly reading. That's got to build a reading skill, as long as what they're texting isn't like the president where everything's misspelt and you got to like wonder what exactly the fuck he's saying.
Or just using letters for words and things like that. But
random capitals and,
yeah.
the wrong spots, right? It's all weird. But that's a guy that I don't think is a very intelligent person to begin with. I think his parents probably paid him through college and everything else. And he's a guy who says someone like Barack Obama is not very smart. And like that guy was the head of the Harvard Law Review. And and I'd like to get into that a little bit. Like you did the book, which I did preview a little bit of that online where I could look at a little bit of it. But what I was talking about was I would think that my sons, because of, and I don't feel like that's reading in the same sense that if I pick up a John Irving novel and I read it, I will read for 45 minutes at a time. Once every day or so, I'll really read. I feel like my brain is smarter and quicker when I go do other things because I'm reading,
Right.
which seems strange because I'm just doing this exercise where I read words but I guess my brain is also putting a picture together and then feeling how
Yeah.
this person would feel and all these other things that it's doing TV's lazy. It's just, you can just see the things and it's just there. So
Right.
I think it's good for my brain. I don't get that same like heightened intelligence feeling from reading social media posts. And in fact, I feel dumber sometimes. I'm like,
Right.
why did I?
Right.
There are definitely times where I'm like, because it's a time suck. I read social media for 30 minutes the one time and I looked at the clock. I'm like, oh my God, 30 minutes. That was 30 minutes. I can't believe what am I doing? I got to get out of here. And then I, put the thing down. But 45 minutes in a book and I feel good about it as far as that goes.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I wonder what how that goes as far as literacy levels go, because even if you're a kid who's not a good student now, if you want to be with the cool kids, you're texting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's got to be some
Yeah.
value to the fact that you're writing stuff. I mean, you spell check, do whatever you got to do. But so, I don't know if there's help there. And then, like I said, someone turned me on to novels and she was right. Like they
Yeah.
are, it's awesome. It really is way better. The problem is the time, because you can, like I can read The World According to Garp. It's like 400 pages. That's going to take me a few weeks to get through.
Mhm.
Where if I watch the movie, I can do it in an evening. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's
And that's
parts that are
appeal
missing.
for people.
Right,
Mhm.
right, for sure. And whoever cast those did a good job. Like I was okay with that. But that's a weird literacy thing as far as there, like you said, there's so much text. I can't believe what we read today. Like
Mhm.
it's a ton. I mean, if I Google something, I'm reading. If I'm always reading something somewhere. Uh,
Right.
but to your Obama book, Barack Obama, for me, I was extremely hopeful for his presidency. I was
Mhm.
extremely excited about it. And I got to say that I was let down.
Yeah.
I was a little bit like, man, I really thought you were going to do, and I'm a Bernie Sanders guy. Like I
Me
see
too.
this
Yeah.
guy that was going to do things that were just to help people. And he could not care less about a corporation. It was just,
Mhm.
how can I help people? And my thought was, that's a more patriotic guy than this meathead we have that's hugging a flag and doing all this other.
Mhm.
That's not patriotism. That's like nationalism, and that's actually dangerous.
Right. It
So
is. Mhm.
you've got, so Obama, and I didn't read the book. When you wrote the book and you researched the book, did
Mhm.
anything change your feelings on the guy? And the book was obviously written in 2019. So
Mhm.
it was written after the entire presidency was over. And
Right.
there were things like not shutting Guantanamo, all the drone strikes, the fact that he didn't really advance black people the way that I thought he would have. I think
Mhm.
he advanced them in a way that you can't see, like a persona way, where black
Right.
children could think they could be president, sort of a thing. Um, how were your feelings about him after writing a book about a guy?
Yeah. Eh, I think like I'm a big Obama fan in the sense of I just love him as a person. Like as I've read his books and as a writer and the things he's tried. Yeah, there of course I was really, really just so disappointed. Like the drone thing, and I read that Biden's putting that drone lady back in one of his cabinet members, and I hate those. I think it's disgusting, and I was so woefully disappointed in that. He was battling too. You had this Congress, the Republican. It was like stalemate so much,
Yes,
and
and he had the problem that if he knew the minute he laxed up on that situation, and then there was an attack that came this way, he would pay. because he was the guy that was in charge. So like when he didn't draw back the Patriot Act and the NSA powers and all that and the Snowden stuff and everything else,
Right.
as a liberal, that bothered me to no end. I really felt like George Bush had betrayed our privacy in a way that we were going to get back when this guy, and he made speeches saying that's what he was going to do, that he was going to, you know, tamper down these things that they, and he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I think he saw, and I can empathize with his situation. He saw it where I know that we're collecting metadata and personal data on every single citizen, but it's keeping us safe. And if I have an attack on my watch, I'm not going to get the same treatment that Bush got when it was on his watch. Because Bush had the intel telling him that they were going to hijack planes and do this, and it happened. And somehow he grabbed a shovel, stood on a pile of rubble and a bunch of dead people, and he was a hero. And I just never got it. I didn't understand it. So I empathize with Obama in that situation. But the end result still was not what I wanted. It still did not, like it was, and I guess I held it too high of a standard. I was definitely a guy who like had I don't want to say a tear in my eye, but I was choked up when he got inaugurated. And then also like when he did the whole parade in Chicago and the whole, it was an amazing part of history to see. I almost feel bad for my right-wing friends because like,
it was phenomenal.
Yeah. But I mean,
so phenomenal.
In history, they don't have that anywhere. Like we're going to have when Biden, and I'm not a Biden fan either, Biden was a punchline and now he's president. Like Joe's great and everything else. He has a great story where he lost his family. Like it's all very nice. I think he's a very nice old man, but there were better candidates that were in the primary.
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you. I was a Bernie. I loved him for so long. He's wonderful.
I did all that.
I'm so glad Biden's, and because that.
Yeah. Me too. Yes. But I don't want anyone to. My problem is I'm not a Democrat. I am an independent, but I'm an independent. Like Sanders, an independent. He's a Democrat because he had to be to try and be the nominee to be the president, try and change things. But it's a very difficult thing to keep watching because to me, Biden felt like Hillary 2.0. And I'm like, you guys are making a mistake here because you don't understand the American public does not want this establishment thing. And you literally picked a more establishment person than Hillary was. You with someone that has been in government longer than she has.
Yeah.
You put him out there. Now I'm super excited about Kamala Harris being the first, woman of color, vice president. It's almost an embarrassment that it's taken this long for this to happen. I think that guys ought to get smarter and start figuring out that we should put women in charge because listen, I would love to be Mr. Mom. If I would have married an attorney or someone who could make enough money, I would have stayed home. Sweetie, you go do you, and I am going to do this right here. It's going to be fine. If we would just let women run the government, I think that we would be in better shape than we are. I think that I had people come to me 10 years ago. Three women came to me and said, we think that you should run for office. And I was like, I should not do that. And I go, well, first, I don't want that responsibility. Second, it doesn't seem like anything that's appealing to me. Third, I'm not sure how I will. I know the minute that you got into office, they come for you. They are.
Yeah, I would never want that. Yeah.
No, I don't trust myself in that situation. I think I would try to do my best, but when there was a certain amount of money and a certain good maybe I could do with that money. Then my point is, and I hate to ramble on, because I understand that I empathize with Obama's positions and the fact that he ended up where he was at, and that he made a lot of money and like things that I really wasn't wanting him to do, but I think he did a great job considering all the factors he had to deal with. So I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but So yeah, how did anything change as far as you did research? You had to find out
Yeah,
things that you didn't know.
yeah. I guess I wasn't I had read his first book, but I learned a little more about, the um what he did in Chicago. I probably went in too deep with what I read about him, truthfully, for what I had to write, because it's a kid's book, and it's so two things. So this was, again, so that was actually a freelance contract that I got with a publisher. So for instance, like my novel that's out, you um, can get royalties. So down the line, I mean, it's not breaking the bank here. People who make a lot of money out, you have to sell
Yeah.
a lot of
Yes.
books, right? So it's um, I'm not poo-pooing I'm very happy for the publication, but that's the royalty thing. Well, with freelancing, sometimes you will get hired as work for hire, it's called. So you're basically kind of like a writer for hire. So you get paid a flat fee for the books they contracted that they wanted three biographies: Barack Obama, Marley Diaz, and Amandla Stenberg. And so they pay me the flat fee. So if you were to buy those books, or I had some teacher friends who got their schools to buy them, I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm so happy they did that. But I don't get royalties. They just paid me flat out. So a lot of times they'll come and say, here's what we want you to write. These are kind of the things the timeline, maybe in these biographies we want you to cover, so I did come up with an outline, and then they came back and said, okay, go in depth a little more here, and that kind of thing. And then I wrote it. So it's not fully my creation, I guess. It's because I'm working with a publisher who wants a specific thing. And the other thing about the Obama book, and then the other two in that set, is they're called what's called high-low work. So it's basically targeted for students who are reading below grade level. So if they're in middle school, but they're reading at a lower level, so the high part of that description is higher interest level. So a kid who's a little older. So you want to write it to make it interesting for a middle school kid. But readability, it needs to be at a certain grade level, because they're reading maybe at second or third grade level. So so a lot of that work was, there was a lot of research, but there was also more grappling with how do I make this interesting and engaging, and yet add a readability that, students who English as a second language, that could be another helpful book for them too.
Okay, so now in that situation, you're writing these books, and then that seems pretty cool that there's a design where you're trying to bring someone's reading level up by interesting them in a subject that they'd be interested in. There's this narrative out there that schools are indoctrinating, kids. I do not know who the other two people are in the other two books, but I would venture to guess, just by their complexion, that they are more of a liberal leaning situation, stuff like that. Obviously, Obama is polarizingly, left. But I call bullshit on the indoctrination thing, because I can't see there being, first I had a funny question. Like, if someone came to you and said, hey, Jenny, can you write us a book on Dick Cheney? Like, how would you write that book, right? And then the opposite, the flip side would be, if you found a conservative author and said, would you write a book for children on Obama? Why would you want that book written? Because he's just going to write terrible things in it, right, like that probably aren't even factual, or whatever. But I don't know how the indoctrination thing, how someone could, even if you were a conservative writer, take someone like Dick Cheney and write a book that any kid would have any interest in. Like, and then we went to Halliburton and we got these missiles made. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. So it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily a left-leaning indoctrination, but the stories that are there that help society and help people
Right.
are left-leaning. That's kind of what an empath does, is helps people, where conservative people tend to only think inwardly and help themselves. Now, if we had school that indoctrinated you that way, holy shit, would we be screwed. Like if every kid came out of school and was like, I got to kick somebody in the kneecaps and get their lunchbox, this would not be good, right? This would be a bad scenario. So, like, I don't know, like, and that's, the other thing with people that are on the right, they keep claiming that social media censors them more than people on the left. And I look at them and I go, I don't know, maybe you're more of an asshole than people on the left.
Careful what you're writing.
Right. Like, I think that's really what happens. I think your tendency to use the N-word is probably at a 20 times more greater,
Right. I mean,
than mine would be. That would not. I have had people that I enjoy their company, and I have said stuff to them because if you are offended by me calling you on your bullshit and you don't want to talk to me anymore, then we ain't friends anyway. So do what you
just spy.
I had a buddy of mine who wrote a joke on Facebook and he used the N-word in the joke, and it was not like somehow Mark Twain-y in any way. It was like straight up, this guy is this. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And I go, you're my friend. Why would you do that for yourself? You're going to close doors. Because I go, I'm disgusted with you, man. That's a terrible thing to do.
Right.
And he's like, oh, come on, man. Like, and I'm like, no. I go, you don't seem to get it. I'm a white guy. That's an embarrassing part of our history. And you're acting like it's perfectly fine.
Right.
It's not. So, when someone gets censored because they did that, well, that's because only a conservative, I don't know. I know no liberals that have those. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's not a coincidence that when you're a Trump supporter and you're at a rally, you could look next to you and there's a guy with a Confederate flag, and you look left and there's a guy with a friggin', Nazi flag. Hey, maybe you're on the wrong side.
Who are you running? Like, what crowd you running in?
Right. If Neil deGrasse Tyson's on my side and Ted Nugent's on yours, you're on the wrong side.
Right.
You got to get out of there.
My friend Ann always used to say, like, pay attention to the commercials. Like, were we growing up with TV and the commercials? And like, if you're watching Jerry Springer, you know what? It's going to be a toilet bowl commercial. But if you're watching something intelligent, it's going to be something, so just really have some discernment of what you're doing and who you're listening to. And
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they don't. I mean, and the problem is not enough people are reading. I mean, I think that's the problem. Like, if you read, and fiction for sure, because if you read fiction, there's going to be, well, unless you're like, what's the, there was a conservative writer that was really popular, like in the 80s and 90s, like Harrison Ford was in a bunch of his movies and stuff like that. Tom Clancy and that's a conservative writer as far as that goes. Like, it's all about
military
and bullshit. That's not really patriotism. But if you read fiction, for the most part, you're going to get a lot of people that are empathizing with how somebody else feels about something.
Right.
And maybe you're going to walk away being more of an empath than you were if you just watch Fox News all day long. Because I watch Fox News every once in a while just to see what these people are going to say. And it's amazing, the crazy that's there. And those people are leaving in droves because they hate Fox News now. And they're going to this OAN network that's like, it's called One America Network. And it is yes, right. You want to talk about brain melting. These people are saying things that make no sense. There's no validity to it. Like, so when you were in college and stuff, did you take some journalism type? Like,
me personally?
Yes.
No, I took, well, as an undergrad, I majored in English and anthropology, actually.
Okay.
And I, for a little while, wasn't sure when I went to graduate school if I would go anthropology or a different route. But I ended up then getting my master's and focusing on English, but I went here in Milwaukee. They had I could do an emphasis on creative writing, which I did. So I did that in graduate school, but I have a master's in English. So I didn't actually I considered journalism, but I thought when I was in my undergrad that I really wanted to teach at the college level. That changed though once I got the teaching job here in Milwaukee at the school I talked about. So
Okay, all right. Well, it just seems to me that like we get all these people that seem to miss they post things like I miss the days where journalists didn't have a side and everything like that. And I don't know. I mean, I know like from history, we were polarized pretty good during like Ronald Reagan's time, during Barry Goldwater, which was right before Reagan and stuff like that. We definitely had a far left and a far right. I guess I get so frustrated and let down with the people in this country when they don't have any grasp of history at all. They say things like, Republicans can't be racist because Lincoln was a Republican. No, Lincoln was a progressive. So the parties were different then. And then like
they were very different then, right?
The look of melting paint on their face when I start to explain this to them is like they don't understand. But Republican part, and like, no. But
it's not the same.
If you were a person being a Republican, 100 years ago, you'd be a Democrat. Like, well, they're like, I'd never be a Democrat. I'm like, it's like I'm talking to a 3-year-old. Like, this doesn't make any sense in the world. It's like saying I'd never be a toad. Yeah, I understand that, but you don't understand that the Southern Dixie, those were your slave owners. When we had the Civil War, the people that were fighting against slavery, but then they'll say weird things like, well, the Civil War wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights. And I'm like, no, that's a thing that somebody told you now. Like, it was totally about slavery. This is exactly what the Civil War was about. And this is why it went on forever, because they didn't want to quit because they were going to lose a way of life when they lost slavery.
So that's like a big reason for the secession. Yeah.
I just want to like, at some point, I just want to be like, forget it. I just want to start picking up fiction novels and just read that and not even deal with reality anymore, because you're never going to get these people to like understand. Like, my only angle is, like I said, get them to read empathetic fiction so they could start to empathize with people. You know what I mean?
I think that's a big reason I write too, because, well, I really struggle with the whole divisiveness, because I had a conversation with my sister about, everything is so divided now. We have family members who, she especially, because she's married, extended family is bigger than mine, and who are just completely on the other side of the political spectrum. So she's like, I just don't know, how do I handle that? I'm like, well, you can't go through your life. You can't, especially like her in-laws. I'm like, you have to find, there are some common things. I'm like, I'm always trying to find common things no matter what, because when we look at these just completely different views, and they're so dividing, and almost like there is nothing more to say. If like they're not going to listen, and then they think we're them. Does that make sense? Like, if you ever really, there goes my youngest. That if you really have a conversation with someone who is on the other side of the political spectrum, like, we're doing what they do. But I think the layer that is different, that I always try to make with people who supported Trump, I'm sorry, is you have someone who breeds hate. He has turned up the ugly underbelly of this country and said it's okay.
He's made it. I say what he is he's the asshole president. He's every asshole's wet dream of a president, because he's saying the things that they've been saying behind closed doors. And that turn. He's
Right.
just saying it, and they're cheering him on, and it's gross. It's
It
just
is.
gross.
It's
It's like I
it's
can't even
disgusting.
think of a better
Hmm.
word than right. Then well, that is a better word, but uh, so yeah, it's really really odd. What I have friends. The wrestling world is there's a lot of conservatives that are in that world, right?
Yeah.
So what I try and do with that is I'm like, listen, can we micromanage the conversation? I don't want to have a conversation about personalities. I don't want to talk about that because I could talk all day about Donald Trump is a disgusting human being. Like he's a bad person as a
Right.
human goes. Every wife he's had, he's cheated on. Everyone that's ever golfed with him says he cheats at that. Like he has cheated
Just oh,
contractors out of money. He's just a bad person. He's also not good at anything that he says he's good at. He's not
it's
good at
funny. Give me
anything.
some more.
Okay, let me go. Maybe somebody gave me the sleepy days.
Okay.
I guess I need to go through
He's not good at anything that he says he's good at. He's a bad person. But let's just talk about if I can sit down over beers or whatever and talk about actual issues. Most of the
Right.
people that I'm going to sit down and have a talk with about issues are going to be middle class, working people. It blows my mind that there are people that are union iron workers or union plumbers, and they are how sweet. Yes, they are super Trump supporters, and it doesn't. Sometimes I can look at the person and be like, all right, well, you're kind of an insecure guy. You know,
I start analyzing.
that's right. Like you're buying into this macho thing, and you don't understand what tough guys are. That's not one of them. So like, I get it. I understand that. But like, if we talk about issues, if I say to you, listen, let's talk economically about the you can't the hot button issues you can't talk about. You can't say like you need to have a living wage because then they're like, oh, Burger McFlippyton needs to make $15 an hour. Now it's going to cost me $13 for my Happy Meal. It's not. You need to understand that McDonald's does not do the same thing that you do at your job to sell a job. They don't do time and material. They do
Right.
market analysis. So they
Right.
say for this thing that's not really food and this syrupy drink, how much can I charge for it and still sell so many units?
Yeah.
Where does the arc turn before I stop selling units and the profit falls off? Because I'm telling you, you're eating about 40 cents worth of food and they're selling it to you for $7. So there's no chance that it's costing $7 to make that.
No.
And if they raise the person's wages, it still wouldn't affect the cost of your Happy Meal. So combat that theory. And
But then that person wouldn't have to get a second job to just live.
Right. So, but if you can have those conversations and like explain things, and then also go into things like, all right, listen, healthcare shouldn't be for profit, and this is why, and then start showing them the CEO compensation for health insurance companies. I go, there's a guy that's making $89 million every year. Now, people are bad at math. So you have to be like, all right, let's break down what $89 million is.
Right.
We're all right around 50 years old. At this point in our work careers, Friday seems to happen all the time. Like, holy shit, it's Friday again, right?
Mhm.
A week is a very short period of time.
Yeah.
You get paid weekly and you're a guy that makes $1,000 a week. It's like, hey, it's Friday, there's $1,000. If you're a guy that makes $52 million a year, it's Friday, there's $1 million.
Yes.
And I go, you need to understand the difference between 1,000 and 1,000,000. And it's amazing to me how many people don't understand what the difference between 1,000 and 1,000,000 is. They think it's kind of close. It's not.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 of the thousands. So
Right.
like it's very far apart. And I mean, when you look at someone and say, Jeff Bezos makes what his average worker makes in the first 58 seconds of the year, they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, 58 seconds and he makes what they make. And then every 58 seconds after that, he makes what they make. So like, when there's certain things you can say to a conservative, like, hey, how come it's okay for you to pay 27% in taxes, but Jeff Bezos pays $0 on $11 billion in taxes? And they're not okay with that. And I'm like, all right, I want to take it further for you and explain to you why Jeff Bezos I think it's a situation where you're a painter and you make $45,000 a year. I think your tax rate should be somewhere around 18 or 17%. And Jeff Bezos' tax rate for the most part of his money should be somewhere around 78 or 82% because, and they're like, oh my God, you want to charge them 82%? I'm like, calm down. You need to-
Right.
First, the problem is that you have to explain everything to everyone.
Right.
First, I owned businesses for years. Taxes don't work like that. So for the first, $150,000, he gets to keep most of that because he's
Yeah.
getting the same rate you are at that 18 or 17%.
Right.
Then after that, the money he makes after that jumps up to this amount, up to 500,000. Then after that, it jumps up to this after to $1 million. Then it jumps up again. So all the while, he's pocketing money at the same rate other people are, but at the same rate the other people are making that money, he's keeping that money. But by the time he gets to 10 billion, I'm perfectly fine with them charging him 90% in taxes because, and they're like, that's insane. He's got to pay all these taxes. I go, listen, you learn how to read and write in public school. He hires 100,000 people. All of them can do their job and make money for him because they learn how to read and write in public school too. So he should pay for the school because he's profiting from the school. You drive around your car, you hit a pothole, get a flat tire. There should have been more tax money to fix that pothole. Now you're a guy on the side of the road with a flat tire. Jeff Bezos has thousands and thousands of trucks on the road. He should pay at a higher rate because he's destroying the road.
Yeah.
And then they start to go, well, that kind of makes sense.
You finally win it.
Right. So like some of
Right.
those things. And then I get, the bad thing is that as a liberal, me and you have to explain who we are all the time to these people because they immediately enter the conversation with, you're the person that Judge whoever's on Fox News told me you are. You're this whiny, cryy, soft, snowflakey liberal. The hurdle I don't have to get over with the people that know me for a long time is when you look at me, I kind of look like a meathead. When you know me and you know who I was, I'm not a guy that was soft or sensitive or any of that. And if you offended me, chances are I was going to punch you in the face. So they knew me as that guy. I get more people that are surprised when they find out I voted for
Your
Obama
views.
twice. Yeah, they're like, oh, how could that be? You can't be that guy. And I'm like, because I thought about it for a little longer than the 30 headline. And I don't want to treat them like they're stupid, but we live in a society that has created lazy thinkers.
I agree.
Right? So they read the headline and then that's all.
Really read the whole article and really search for a corroborating source. That's the kind of thing. And I've really tried to train myself to, you're like, again, back to social media. If I'm scrolling through and I see a headline that is something that aligns with how I view something, I've gotten to where it's like, no, Jenny, don't hit like unless you read it. Do you know what I mean? Just look and actually read it instead of falling into the trap of, I'm just going to click it because I like what that says. That agrees with my ideology and my way of thinking and my politics or whatever it is. So sometimes I'll just, I don't want to read that right now. So I'll scroll through and go on to something else. But I've really tried to force myself to say, no, I'm going to actually read the whole thing before I hit like. Do I really like it? And where's it coming from? And that kind of thing.
So I'm going to try and impress you because, I make a point on social media because I'm trying to use it as a mental exercise, as I try and use everything as that the things that I write and put on, for the most part, every once in a while I'll see something that I'll share it. I am not a sharer of memes. None of that stuff happens with me. I actually think of the things that I write and write those things. You know what I mean? Like I watch the debate and I'm mostly looking for a laugh because anymore there's just no, it's just
I know.
masturbation to be like trying to convince somebody of something that they're never going to be convinced of. But most of my posts that have anything to do with anything, they're a joke and I try to write it as original material. Like I try and make sure that I'm writing, like I wrote, and then what's funny is I know it's just parallel thinking. I know they didn't steal it from me, but like I wrote when Mike Pence had the fly on his head, that was Mike Pence's only black friend. And I saw that, like, I go, that's literally Mike Pence's only black friend. I saw that a bunch of places after that, like on Twitter and stuff like that. I know it didn't come from me, but
Right.
it came from my mind. Like, I'm
You thought it. Yeah.
positive this man has no other black friends than this fly. So like for me, that makes me happy to write something that I came up on my own.
Right.
And, you know, if there's a joke that I can think of and stuff like that. And the problem that I run into is the butt of most of my mental humor is Republicans and conservatives.
Yeah.
I am lost. The Donald Trump thing kind of set me on a weird edge where like,
Yeah.
I thought that I was always arguing with people that were just ideologically wrong, but it turns out most of them are, I don't want to say this. I really enjoy my friends who are Trump supporters, and I don't believe they're as bad as the news stories or the crowds that go to the rallies are. I don't believe that. I believe that they're decent people that would help you if they knew you, but I think that they've been told that they're supposed to be afraid of the other people and stuff like that.
Mm.
But I was disheartened when I found out that most of these people didn't have an ideology. Donald Trump's not a conservative. He's spent more money than any liberal that I've ever. It's insane the amount of money this guy's spent, and they stick by him. They have seemingly forgot about the deficit. They forgot about the national debt.
Right.
All that's gone now. I'm sure it's going to be a brand new thing when Biden becomes president.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to worry about that again. But they didn't have an ideology, which made me sad. They just followed this asshole. They followed this guy that was an asshole. And Donald Trump did something today. Every once in a while he says something that I do laugh at. He made fun of himself today. And I'm on the fence whether or not he knew he was doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so how do you fall on it? Do you think he is an evil mastermind or a buffoon?
Or what?
A buffoon.
I think he's a buffoon, but I also think he's a dangerous buffoon because I do think he is a very bad person. I really do. And I think I don't trust him. He has elements of evil mastermind. Like when my sister says, she's like, Jenny, I'm so scared of a coup because you won't concede. And I think there's some mental health things happening or personality disorders all put into one person. And then just a complete, utter child. You know, his behavior is equivalent. You know, you've raised children, the toddler years, and someone who's in his 70s.
Those fits. I follow him on Twitter, and
just to examine it. Mm-hmm.
It's bonkers. It's absolutely. Yeah. It was bonkers before the election, and then after that, he is literally just repeating the same tweet over. I won. All caps, all X. Like
right.
You didn't. Like nothing you're saying. He keeps repeating things, and he'll tell people in interviews that he believes that if you put it out there, you can make it true.
Right.
You can't make something that's just patently false true. Like you can't change something that already happened. He also says things like, and it hurts my brain to think that we're a nation of this many dum-dums. He says things today like his little speech today was the stock market reached 30,000 today. It's a magical number. It's a number no one thought we'd ever reach. It's the highest number ever. That is literally like saying the population reached 330 million. No one ever thought it would get there. There's more people than ever. Yes, that's how it goes. We keep getting more people. The stock market keeps going up. Every president had this thing where he got the highest number because over a 4-year period, it grows over every single time.
Right.
There's not a president that I know of that came into office and left office, and at some point, the stock market wasn't the highest it ever was.
Yeah, it's ever.
Right? It's a growing thing. It's like a plant. It's like saying that tree is it's because I'm here.
Did you see that? Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with you. You just were there. So, but he says it, and then what hurts my brain is, and my heart, is that morons repeat it.
Right.
They say it, and I'm like, do you understand what you're saying? It doesn't make any sense what you're saying. But
Right.
today, he did the pardoning of the turkey thing, right?
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the little speech, but if you get a chance to look it up,
Okay.
he's literally making fun of himself, and I don't know if he knows he's doing it.
Oh,
He says that we had a vote, and we're going to pardon. We weren't going to pardon the turkeys, and Carrots wanted a recount, so he did a recount. Too bad for Carrots; it didn't work out. If Carrots isn't Donald, I don't know what
Yeah.
Carrots is, right? And
yeah.
he goes, so we're still going to pardon, or the turkey and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And the crowd is laughing when he's like, sorry, Carrots, it didn't work out. It still ended up being the same. And I'm like, dude, you're Carrots.
Right.
You.
Right.
So so I'm on the fence. I don't think he's intelligent, but I do think he knows. I think he knows what he's doing to a certain extent, and I think he just doesn't care. Like
Right.
with the phone call to the Ukrainian,
Yeah.
I think he absolutely knew what he was asking for. I think he
me
knew
too.
how to ask for it in a gangster sort of way.
Right.
Thought he was kind of getting around the whole
Yep.
pro quo situation.
Yep.
So I think he had the forethought. I think it was premeditated. I mean, he told George Stephanopoulos that if a foreign leader had dirt on his opponent, he would absolutely take it. He would absolutely. Right. He said this in an interview where he didn't have to say it. I think I don't think he's as stupid as people say he is.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't think he's got a grand plan except for himself. I think
Yeah.
The coup thing, I don't think he's a tough guy. So I think if he actually had to roll his sleeves up and actually do some fighting,
right. Do something,
he would not want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he wants to open up a news network. I think he wants his followers. It is a little bit scary that he has 70 million.
Oh, that terrifies me. It makes me sad, really.
It does. It is something that's weird. And I mean, to watch these people post things like, we haven't played Patriots and Antifa yet, or something like that. And in their mind, anyone who's a liberal is somehow supporting Antifa. Antifa is like 40 people in someone's basement in Oregon. Like, right. That's not even a thing to be worried about. I have friends that are more worried about Antifa and Black Lives Matter than they are coronavirus. And coronavirus has killed 260 million people. I mean, I don't think Antifa and Black Lives Matter have killed hardly anybody. So I don't know what you're worried about as far as this thing goes.
Wow.
It is definitely, it's almost like if you get these people not in a group, they're easier to like talk to and deal with and stuff like that. But as soon as they see a group, it's a powder keg that seems to.
Yeah.
And I mean, you had the whole, up in Wisconsin with the Kenosha kid and everything else. Oh. Have you looked into any of that? Like,
well,
I did research on it and stuff, so I don't know.
I haven't done extensive research, but I mean, I read a few articles when it was happening. There was so much happening at that time. I was just so appalled by it, like that. And then the bombardment of everything else that was happening. But yeah, I mean, it's a perfect example of different rules for some than the others, looking at the color of your skin. I mean, it was just, it's right there. And then that people could even defend that. I don't understand that behavior,
Right. So now personally, I've had people that were like, that I engage with on the opposite side. They're right wing, they're Trump supporters, females, that would message me after, and I try and keep it civil and everything else,
mm-hmm.
that, would it be interested in dating? And I'm like, I don't even know how would we do that? Like,
they want to date you even in
yes. Yeah. They would be fine with, they're like, you seem open-minded and this kind of a thing. And I'm like, yeah, but how can
that's always been curious to me too. Like, cause that's come up a little bit for me. And that
I think it comes
dating
up,
world.
that's where I was going. I was going to you because I think it comes up more for females than it does for males because the amount of male population that would be a Trump, 70% of white males voted for Donald Trump. So I don't know, what, like, if there was I would date a black woman, an Oriental woman, Chinese, Korean, whatever, Mexican, whatever it is, under the same criteria that I would date a white woman. I mean, I have my certain like things that I find attractive and stuff, but my criteria has much more to do with who you are than what you are, or what you look like, or anything like that. So it's really very much, I won't say that I'm not somewhat shallow, or, like attractive women, but I don't have a thing where I would, only date in a certain pool, but I want a certain personality, and it would have to absolutely be somebody that was empathetic to other people. I couldn't
I
imagine,
know.
like,
I've had that question like, but if that person, there's no way I could, because the problem is like someone who would support Trump, there's going to be something very core values that are so completely antithetical to the person I am that I couldn't connect with that person.
but you've got two categories, right? You've got there's Trump supporters I know that they've got the thing around them in their profile picture, Trump 2020. Some of it's still on there now, and I'm like, it's over, dude.
To take it down, right?
I take it down anytime soon. I have certain neighbors out here, like south of the city, that had Trump flags up, and then after the election, they took them down. Other neighbors still flying them. They're still, hoping the Supreme Court's going to change it for them. I don't know, but so there's a difference between the casual voter. I think there's a lot of people that watched The Apprentice and they thought he was the character.
I agree. I know people who, if they're just going to vote for one issue, so they're just, no matter what, they're always going to vote for someone who's pro-life.
Yes.
And so that's no matter what. I mean, there's a good portion of people that I think that's why they would support him. And but even still, if I had even someone who was like I think that he is such a candidate, such a person in that position. Like I could have maybe said that. Like I can't believe the way that I thought George W. Bush was so horrible. Like he's just looking so much better right now.
Oh my God.
And
that's Trump is the greatest thing that ever happened to George W. Bush, right? He's like, that guy's a war criminal, and he's like, okay, right?
He's
like
looking pretty good now.
That's right, right. He's like painting dogs and cats and his feet and like all kinds of other shit now. And everyone's okay with this guy that killed hundreds of thousands of people because look at this other idiots. Like, holy cow. Yes, no,
it's so ridiculous that way. But so even if it was like I don't think you can have, if people are like the milder Trump supporter, if we were to put it on like a continuum, I would still say you are so tunnel vision, you can't see what this person has done to the country, really, and the hate that has risen up from his speech. When people say, just listen to the man talk, and that I could never commune with someone and to date them.
Do you think that I've never tried to analyze it this way. I do listen to him talk, and I follow him on Twitter, and I read his tweets. And when he gives a speech, I look at it. Do you think that the Trump supporter that's out there doesn't ever even listen to a Joe Biden speech? Or do they listen to it and just be like, you're liar, bullshit, liar, you're saying, you're just giving me lip service or whatever like that? Because there is a monstrous difference between what that guy's saying and what that guy's saying. And I am not, during the entire election, I never posted a pro-Biden anything because I was like, guys, I told my Democratic friends, if they lose, you just lost me. I'm done.
Mhm.
I am not holding my nose and voting for another Democrat again.
Yeah.
You're just going to lose elections now. That's it. So we did this again, and here we are. And
Yeah.
this was the first time. I always thought it was hyperbolic to say our democracy is it was this time. A second term of that guy would have been devastating. So, and then the other thing that the news is really trying hard right now to push is this false narrative that Joe Biden was the only one that could have got this done.
Yeah.
That is complete malarkey. It's to use his own term,
Yeah.
complete crap. The progressives, the AOCs, the woman up in Minnesota, they
Yeah.
won by landslides.
Yep.
Those were progressive candidates with progressive ideas. The people that lost were the wishy-washy. I'm
Yeah.
going to try and be in the. No one's inspired by that shit.
Right.
If you are a person who, and I had to explain this to my Democratic friends. If you were a person that the sole reason you were energized was because Donald Trump is such a horrible human being, that means you were going to vote for anybody that wasn't named Donald Trump.
Right.
There's a whole nother group of people who are voting on issues. They're voting because they're more empathetic than you are, and they see people hurting and they want change. They want something different. And they are the people that you're mad at when Hillary lost, blaming third-party voters and stuff like that.
Right.
Listen, you had a candidate that was filling stadiums and everything else, and you had a candidate that couldn't fill a gymnasium, and you ran with that candidate. I voted for her, but I was real nervous. I mean, I had people that were on both sides, and I had people on the Republican side that were like, do you think that Trump can win? And I'm like, absolutely. They're like, you're nuts. You're nuts to think that this guy could win. Hillary's going to be the next president. I'm telling you, no one likes her. She's universally hated on the right. Like it is crazy the amount of hate they have on that side. I go, she could lose. She could totally lose. And then she did.
Yeah.
I go, this can happen again with Biden. I'm upset that they lost seats in the House and they didn't overtake the Senate. Like you pretty much have a situation you were just talking about with Obama. Biden's going to come in office and he's not going to be able to get anything done except for undoing all these executive orders that so which is going to be a good thing.
It's something. Mm-hmm.
I don't want people to go into a bear's den and shoot the hibernating bears. Let's not do that. I'm a hunter and that's not right. That's just not you do it. That's not right. So, that stuff drives me nuts. I'm glad that's going to be that way. I'm 100% glad that Biden's going to be president. I don't think people danced in the street because Joe Biden's going to be president. I think they danced in the street because Donald Trump's no longer going to be president. I mean, I hope that the Democratic Party can see this and start to move that way because they're going to lose people like me. Yeah. And I'm going to be the guy that Democrats hate. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but in my lifetime, I want to see I don't know how you are with it, but like I've heard people tell me that Democrats and liberals want equal outcome. And I go, I have never heard a Democrat say that or a liberal. They want equal opportunity. Yeah. What you do with it is what you do with it. That's your thing. You can't, so dating wise, if there was someone who was just like, well, I watched The Apprentice. He seems like a good businessman. I don't really watch the news. I'm a guy that's, working a job, doing whatever. Could you conceive of dating that person who had essentially they're wrong about everything, right? Like, because they are. They're wrong about economics. They're wrong socially. You're wrong. Right. Could you date someone like that? Because, I'm talking about the extreme. I had the people that were like, trumpety. And they're like, it was interesting.
Hey, you want to go out for a drink?
I went out with a couple of them that I didn't know that that's where they were at. Yeah. I was on a date with a woman and she started explaining that she lived as a homosexual. And she's like, that's not real. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, well, homosexuals, that's just a thing that they're doing. There's not really any homosexuals. I was like, oh, we just started lunch. This is going to be a really long time. I'm going to have to do this now. And we went through this thing, and she said everybody that's homosexual was molested as a child, and that's why they're just confused. I'm like,
Oh.
whoa. And they need to take Jesus Christ and all this other stuff.
Oh,
And
no.
I thought I was being punked. I'm looking for a camera.
Someone's going to bring out a
yeah, what's going on here? How did I get here? So, and I did the whole lunch with her. I go, let's agree to disagree that's the case. And I try to explain to her, I go, listen, I think there's a spectrum that people could be on. I think you could be, a little bit towards the homosexuals, however you want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, and I don't say this because it's a machismo thing or anything like that. I am not attracted. I know what a good looking man looks like, and I'm not attracted to it. It's not attractive to me. I like women for other reasons than just, breasts and ass. And I like them for their mannerisms. I like them for, when I got injured, I was like, thank God I'm a guy. I go, it's a terrible thing to say, but guys are shallow. If anyone called me a sexist, it would be the other way around. Like, I would think that women are better than men. I would rather spend my time. I have these dinners here with a dozen or 8 people, and it's like one guy is there because he's a husband, and it's all just ladies. And we just have political talks, we drink wine, we talk about that kind of stuff. I just like to surround myself with women. It's not a sex thing. It's like I like to have those conversations with them and stuff like that. And I absolutely like the way they're shaped. I like the manners. I like everything about women. And my explanation to her was, look at, someone grabbed one of my children, put a gun to their head and said, be a homosexual. I couldn't do that. But if they said, do a homosexual act to save my child, I can do that. That I can do.
Right.
I can be gay.
Right.
Right. But I can't actually, and I explained to her, I go, listen, that'd be like saying, I asked her, I go, what is your favorite color? And she's like, red or whatever she said. And I go, is there a dollar amount I could pay you to make your favorite color? Now, I'm not saying for you to favor that color. I'm saying that you love that color now. Can I make you love blue? And she's like, no. And I go, that's gay thing. Like,
yeah,
you can make me live a gay lifestyle, but you can't make me attracted to that.
A certain way, right.
Right. And for a guy, there's a certain kind of equipment situation that's got to work out for this to work out. And it's not going to work with a guy.
It's not going to respond. Right.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm not going to do that because it's not the thing that makes me happy that way. And she was like,
right.
I disagree. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing else we can talk about. I paid for lunch. I rolled out of there, right? Just shaking my head like, I can't believe I had this conversation with this person. This person was of Mexican descent and was totally for Trump and everything else. And I got 2 blocks away and she calls me. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? She goes, I really had a good time. I hope we can do it again. Let's talk. And maybe this could be something. I had to say to her, I go, listen, you seem, I can't even, can't make you seem like a really nice person. You seem like a horrible person. and I had an okay time because I'm not emotional about these things, but this is nothing that I could ever see myself doing.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to, I can find things like if I was on 10 dates with you, I'm positive I could find things that we would disagree on. And I would like to have conversations about those things because boring conversations to me are the ones that are like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's
boring. Let's talk about the nuance of something and let's get in the weeds about something. And then I'll learn something. Maybe I'll change my position on something. That's exciting to me. So I could date someone that doesn't have exactly my political views.
Right.
Date someone that's in a cult. That's crazy. That's absolutely nuts. It seemed crazy to me that she didn't realize she was saying things that would be hurtful to these other people. That's a terrible thing for you to say. And I go, I have a gay couple that's female and a gay couple that's male that I've been out to dinners with and stuff like that. And I go, it's never come to conversation. I don't think they've all been molested.
No, it's ridiculous.
Right. It's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, she was projecting her situation onto the situation. It just drove me nuts. So someone's going to listen to this, and I have Republicans that listen to this, and they're going to say, you're intolerant and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really not saying that. And I ask this of other people too. How do you see the longevity of something going on if you're
Right.
at, like, you know, you would have permanent furrowed brow.
Right. You couldn't,
How am I
and
gonna,
just completely anxiety ridden, clenching my mouth and, just completely furious all the time. No, that's no.
I know couples that's how they work it out, and I look at her or him, and I'm like, I don't know what you're doing, dude.
Well, it doesn't have to be like everything, no, but I think that this, like I said, is a perfect example. Like, that's one thing that I think that Trump has done, is it just given this, that it, like, the gavel is down, you're just like, some people, it's such a division. Like, I think in the past, maybe before, I probably would have said I probably wouldn't date a Republican. I think it's just, if someone's really believes in some of the values of being conservative, I don't agree at all. And then that's going to be
something. Is there anything about a conservative at all? Is there anything that they, there are things like, okay, but they don't do them is my problem. The one thing I can say is, like, I would like our government to only spend within the budget. Like, I would like them to spend.
Yeah, there's
that's
something.
supposed to be conservative, right?
Right.
But in our lifetime, do you remember there being a president that was conservative that did that?
No.
Right. So that's almost a wash for me. That one doesn't work because you don't.
That doesn't work. I can't go right to that.
So in the catalog of conservative ideology, like, if you look at history too, can you tell me what they're right about? Like, they were against gay marriage. You're wrong. Like, you should not be against that. These people are actually trying to live in a monogamous, they're trying to be a better part of society, and you're stopping them from that. That doesn't make any sense. They're trying to do a conservative thing. Like, if you were a real free thinker and everything else, you wouldn't need a piece of paper to commit yourself to somebody, because it's just a piece of paper. I don't need Johnny Law to tell me that I'm connected with this woman. But so they're trying to do that. They were against that. They were against, Black people being full citizens. They were like the thing is that our people on our end, are we doing such a terrible job? Because, like, I've spoke to you for a couple hours now, and you seem very intelligent, right? You seem like you can obviously write, you can string together a thought. Everything else. Right. How are we doing such a bad job of explaining? Because if I sit down with these people, sometimes I can explain something out to them fully, and then they're like, well, that makes sense like that. I almost think there's a conspiracy. This will be the one conspiracy theory that I buy into, that we are on the side that is designed to be the lovable losers, lose elections, to fail, because corporate America owns the whole thing anyway. It's all the market trade.
Right. It's all about money.
Wrong? Like, how are we not articulating our position? Because at one point, the conservatives thought it was okay to own people.
Right.
And they would argue that it was.
Right. I think that, like, I often ask this, like when I was saying earlier, trying to find like something, a commonality, a common entry point to agree, maybe. And the best thing I can
wait, I gotta back you up. On what?
Yeah, right. Oh, food. Like you're talking about with your restaurants.
Okay,
Let's talk about like food.
Totally not political. I get it. Okay, all right.
Something not political. Yeah. Raising kids.
Like Ronald Reagan was raised. No, I can't go there. Right. All right.
Like kid stuff. That would be another thing that you could.
Some of that stuff
maybe,
is like, they're like,
but that could get iffy too. More like,
Yeah.
What do you feed? I guess food. Just that would be it.
Just food, right? Right, right.
Yeah, I don't. But I kind of lost my thought on what I was going to.
No, you
I
said you
lost
would
what
try
I
and
was
find some commonality. Like we were talking
Mhm.
about, how would you get them to see the light, to understand that?
Yeah, yeah. So I it I had a recent conversation with someone who I didn't know voted for Trump and did, and it just devolved, and this person was just saying, I can't stand how the liberals, they'll just keep going on and on about Trump even when he's gone because it's news and he's a personality, blah blah blah, whatever. Okay. And then he was saying how much he couldn't stand how the liberals would say how stupid people are who voted for Trump. And I said, I've never liked that word, for one thing, but one thing that I did say is like, I just think but again, it sounds insulting. It's a limited worldview.
Yeah.
It's a very limited worldview. And there's a lot of white people, and I don't want to just say, well, I won't generalize to white, but when you're in the up position in a society, historically, it is easier and easier to have that limited worldview because you're in power. You're in
Yeah. No, it makes
a
sense.
higher place. So it's things are easier for you. Things happen that you're not exposed to the hardships and difficulties of others that are what they're going through in society. So it's going to be, and everything's going to filter through that lens, and it filters through. And then if you don't expose yourself to other than what you've always known, and you don't read, and I don't mean read what you're coming through your news feed, you don't actually get books and read and like really study anything. It could be an in-depth study. Hopefully it would be historical, but in addition to that, just any kind of thing that would expand your mind. And if you don't expand your sphere, I think that a lot of the people who voted for Trump can it just feeds ignorance.
Yeah. Right. Well, so I try and seek out, I feel much better to have a conversation with you, like to have a conversation where we talk while we talk, because it seems like I'm dealing with someone who's like on the same planet I'm on. Like they're sane. Like it seems like you've thought it out. But I do seek out to have conversations with people on the other side who can have a conversation and not get like crazy or offended.
Yeah, I do too sometimes. That's the one I just had.
Yeah, I find it difficult actually sometimes to not offend them. I had a conversation at a baseball game. So a woman sat down next to me and she said, okay, I'm real good friends with the woman who sold you the tickets to come. It was a big group that went to a game, Cubs Sox game, went to the game. And she says that you're super political, you're, left guy and everything else. She goes, I'm very right. I'm very, very pro-life. She said that if I have a conversation with you, that you'll keep it civil and you will have a conversation with me about this. And I want to have a conversation about abortion. And I was like, fuck me. I'm at a baseball game.
Yeah.
You want to have this terrible, you want to put me on your footing. Okay. And I said, all right, I'm going to give you one inning. And that's what we're going to do. One inning. So I turned to her and I said, all right, listen, let's have this conversation. And I go, I'm going to explain my position on this. And then you can explain to me why the government should tell people, every people, what they can do with their body. And I go, and we're going to have to get, the problem on a hot button issue like that is you have to get a certain baseline of facts to deal with. Like they want to tell you that 200,000 babies were just about to be born and then they scrambled their brains. And that's not a thing. That is something that somebody made up. And I go, okay, So I brought it back to fertility clinics, and she goes, "Why are you talking about that?" And I go, "Well, how are you on that?" She goes, "I'm fine. I had all my 3 kids through that." And I'm like, "Okay, how many embryos did you have made?" She's like 30. And I'm like, "How many times did they fail?" And she goes, and I go, "So you don't consider that killing? Because you do consider it killing if it's
Right.
the day after pill, or if a woman goes in the first trimester." I go,
Mhm.
"Honestly, what you're doing is the exact same thing." And she goes, "No, it's not. I was never going to use." And I go, "But you're saying it's life if it's inside of her, but if it's in a test tube, it's not life. And then you can discard that." And I go, "Well," and she said 30. And I said, "How many children do you have?" And she said 3. And I go, 27 murders on your hands.
Mm.
And she's like, "Well, I don't understand." And so then we went through the whole thing and everything else. We actually got to the end of the conversation, and it went a little more than an inning. She was like, "Well, maybe you're right." And I go, "Here's the other thing. You're not going to outlaw, you're not going to stop abortion. What you're going to do is stop legal, healthy, safe abortions for people.
Yeah.
People are still going to do this thing. They're going to drink something. They're going to use codeine. They're going to do something terrible to themselves that they may never recover from.
Mhm.
And it's because you've made it a law." And then the other one that I always use is, if you believe, I'm not a spiritual guy, a religious guy, in a guy in the sky who, when you die, he's going to judge you, and he watched their hair in your head, and he did all these things, and he knows you, knows what you did, knows your heart and everything else. And you made a society where this person couldn't do the thing, but they wanted to do the thing. Does that make them a good person?
Right.
So if you took someone, a terrible, terrible, terrible person who wanted to rape and kill and steal and everything else, and you put him on a tropical island where they couldn't do any of those things, but he was like, "All I'm going to do when I get off this fucking island is I'm going to rape and steal, and I'm going to everything else." When he dies, if he dies on that island, was he a good person? And they're like, "No." And I go, "So you're trying to create that in the country. You're trying to create a situation. You feel it's morally wrong, so you want to make a law that says they can't do it. How is that working in your religion? It doesn't. That's not a thing."
Right.
So, after the conversation, she was like, and she was like, "It was nice, that." And I go, "Hey, if you want to connect with me on Facebook," she goes, "I don't, because, you're going to make me look dumb on Facebook." And I'm like, "I don't know what to tell you. All I can tell you is that, I'm not for, if there is a situation where the woman that I'm with is in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, and 3 physicians, because that's what it takes to look at her, and they say she is going to die unless
Right.
you abort this pregnancy. This is a fully developed person that I'm in love with, and this is a terrible thing that's going to happen. It's a very bad thing that's going to happen, but it's better than the other bad thing that could happen." So
Right.
that's the choice that I want to be left open. And then the hardliners, the ones that are like
Yeah.
rape and incest, I can't imagine how someone that was raped by someone would be forced to carry. And you're not just going to carry this child, you're going to raise this child. You're going to have to look at this. I mean, do you know how much, like, your kids probably look like you? My kids look like me.
Mhm.
This person's going to see that person.
Right.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. So the hardliners, none of that. And I don't care for the hardline left. The people who are oversensitive about everything, they
Right.
make it hard for us, because I'm trying to be
Yeah.
real here. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, hey, I don't want to keep you. I know it's almost 3 hours now we've been
Oh,
talking.
wow. Well, it's great talking to you.
I'm glad. It was very good talking to you. I'd like to do it again if possible. So,
Absolutely.
I'm supposed to be doing this podcast, and I'm supposed to be getting followers. I'm supposed to be getting, like, subscribers. So
Yeah.
if anyone listening that enjoyed it and stayed till the very end,
Long time.
yes, I would appreciate it if they subscribe. I will edit it tonight and put it out there. I appreciate your time. I'm going to definitely read some poetry.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind it if you read some at one point too. Like that would be awesome.
Be happy to.
Good, cool. Some other time.
Let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving, if you
Yeah,
remember.
nice holiday. Yep.
All right. Bye-bye.